Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
As the heat rises across the United Kingdom, today is expected to be one of the hottest days of the year so far. We're feeling the heat live in Glastonbury.
We are indeed, and the temperature is turning up on top politicians. 3 parliamentary candidates from the 2 major parties have now been suspended over the betting scandal. Should politicians just be banned outright from betting?
Julian Assange becomes a free man after touching down in Australia. We'll be hearing from the unshackled WikiLeaks founder very shortly.
And a disappointing night for the 3 Lions in Cologne as England's sluggish performance ekes out a score draw. But were fans right to boo the team? Should we just get behind them?
Now, political betting. Is it right to just ban politicians, maybe ban everyone from placing political bets? Or is this a new moral panic, a new form of puritanical restriction on people's lives?
What do you think, sir? What do you think? Yes? Puritanical?
I think there is an element of moral panic about all of this. You get hysterical newspaper headlines about people like Alistair Jack, the Scottish secretary, who placed a number of... He didn't have any inside information at all. He placed a fiver on May, he placed a fiver on June, he placed, I think, a bit more money on an autumn election.
Yeah.
And he won some money because he put a fiver down months and months before the Prime Minister had even decided. I mean, why is this a story?
Well, I mean, some people are likening it. Maybe in his case it's slightly different, but a lot of people are likening this all to insider trading. Mel Stride, Cabinet Minister, coming out to say there needs to be a debate about this. In his view, probably should just ban these types of political bets. I think most people in the country would probably say, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most people would say they shouldn't be doing this type of thing, particularly those who are close to the Prime Minister, particularly those who could be privy to things like the general election date, for one. But more broad than that, I mean, is it wrong to take a bet perhaps on the Brexit vote back then in 2016? Should they be voting on who the next Conservative leader might be, or what the outcome of the election could be? I mean, Kevin Craig, this Labour candidate, he's got himself in hot water over voting against himself, betting against himself.
What he did, I think, was genius. I think every candidate should bet against themselves, because if they win, then hooray, they've won, and they're getting a £90,000 a year salary. They're in a great plum position. And if they lose, they'll be mighty disappointed, but at least they can mollify that disappointment with some cash.
Imagine if you put 10,000 on you losing and you needed the money, and so you decided actually you'll just, you know, put out a clangor about yourself so you lose.
I don't think anyone would besmirch their own reputation to win some money like that, especially if they're in a position to be elected as an MP. What this presumes, I think this gets the heart of this scandal. This presumes politicians have way more knowledge, understanding and control than they actually do. Politicians are clueless. They're absolutely clueless, and they have far less control over their own personal fortunes or even understanding of the mechanics of government than most people think.
Gosh, harsh words, eh? But let us know. Do you think MPs should just be banned from political betting? gbnews.com/yourso. Please do get in touch, but it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories this hour. Julian Assange is back on Australian soil, ending his years-long struggle for freedom. He's told the Australian Prime Minister it feels surreal. A warning the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and also greeted by his wife Stella, who he embraced. His journey began yesterday morning here in the UK when he was released from Belmarsh prison after more than 1,900 days. He then landed on a remote island in the Western Pacific, where, accompanied by the former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, he pleaded guilty to 1 felony count in a US court. A man has been arrested in connection to the so-called honey trap plot that rattled Westminster. The Metropolitan Police says a suspect has been held in North London today, accused of harassment and offences under the Online Safety Act. It's after an investigation launched in April in connection to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. It led to William Ragg, who was a senior Tory MP, resigning the Conservative whip after he admitted to giving the telephone numbers of politicians to the suspected scammer. The election betting row is deepening after a cabinet minister revealed he'd also gambled on the date of the vote. Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack denies having broken any rules, but admits to placing 3 bets. He insists he had no inside knowledge of when the election would take place, despite previously revealing that he'd made more than £2,000 from the bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride says the scandal is disappointing.
I think it was absolutely right that the party made internal inquiries and has now come to a very clear conclusion, which is that those candidates are suspended. They will not be supported by the Conservative Party during this general election. And if indeed in the course of time they or any others who are candidates are found to have broken the rules in relation to betting, then they will actually be removed from the Conservative Party. So I think the Prime Minister has been very, very clear. He's very angry about what has happened. I am deeply disappointed about a number of the things that have happened here as well, and that is why action is being taken.
Early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become a thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. The Liberal Democrats have announced a plan to give every cancer patient a dedicated specialist nurse to support them throughout their treatment. It would see nearly 3,500 new nurses recruited across England, doubling the existing workforce by the end of the next Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davies, says it's a crucial step towards fixing the NHS.
The waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many, many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
Some breaking news to bring you now, and aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have both been found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. There had been a high-profile police search for the missing baby, which culminated in the couple's arrest in Brighton last February, with the child found days afterwards. We'll bring you more on that breaking story as we get it. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. My name's Tom Harwood and Emily Carver as well. No, that's not both of our names. I'm not Tom Harwood and Emily Carver. I'm Tom Harwood.
You can be whoever you want to be,
This
Tom.
is Emily Carver.
Anyway, more heads roll, 3 down. How many more candidates from all parties are going to be dragged into the growing row over politicians placing bets on electoral events and outcomes?
Well, the Labour Party's Kevin Craig joins Conservatives' Craig Williams and Laura Saunders in the growing list of budding MPs disowned by their parties in the last 24 hours.
Yes, one cabinet minister has said politicians shouldn't be betting on elections. There are now growing questions on how many more might join the rogues gallery of betting scandal suspects.
Well, joining us now is the political commentator Nathaniel Ogoni. Nathaniel, this is a bad look, first of all, not just for the Tories, but now for the Labour Party too.
Yeah, so I can see why it might look that way, but it's important to note with the Alistair Jack case, there's no suspicion of wrongdoing. It's not suggested that he knew about the date when he placed these bets. I think they were placed quite significantly earlier in the year, and he did place a number. But to be clear, there's no indication that he did anything wrong.
Well, what about Craig Williams and Laura Saunders?
So I suppose their cases are being investigated by the Gambling Commission, right? And so it's important that they are able to complete their work without sort of interference either from the Conservative Party or elsewhere. It's really important that the Gambling Commission does their work. And I think the Prime Minister, when he released a statement yesterday, acknowledged that. He said it's really important that actually the Gambling Commission could get on and examine whether any rules have been broken. And so I think that's probably the best place for that.
It is fascinating to see that the dichotomy that appears to have been drawn here by the Gambling Commission is any politician in the land who placed a bet in May, well, they have an investigation. And if you placed a bet the day before, you don't have an investigation. And, of course, Alistair Jack did in the months beforehand, so no investigation there. He seems to be in the clear. But, my goodness me, a lot of politicians who might have no clue about what on earth was going on inside the head of Rishi Sunak, who happen to have placed a bet the wrong side of this arbitrary line, now have their names dragged through the mud.
Yeah, and I think it's right you pick up on that dragging through the mud. I think a lot of the coverage has indicated that there may be cases of wrongdoing when that's not entirely clear. And when you look at this story, I think it's important to remember some context, right? We're looking at who's going to run our country for the next 5 or so years, that being the duration of a parliament. You know, when it comes to the big topics, the NHS, growing the economy, ensuring migration's at a sustainable level, this issue, although it strikes at a bit of unfairness, doesn't affect that. Right, I think the Sunak v Starmer head-to-head tonight, it should be focused on sort of substantive policy issues as opposed to this sort of stuff.
Yes, I think that's probably right, but the argument goes that Rishi Sunak should have probably dealt with this a little bit earlier, not least to distance his campaign from these issues. But is it time to just make a rule? No political betting for politicians or parliamentary candidates. Surely that is something that most people could get behind.
I think that's probably something that the next government will be looking at. You look at, say, football, and that's the case where actually if you're involved in football, not just as a football player, but actually for a lot of the support staff, whether you're washing the kits on an afternoon or you're working in admin, but a lot of football support staff also can't bet on the result of games. And so you see footballers here betting on, say, the NFL instead. So, yeah, I think that's something that we can see is used elsewhere and we might see here.
Yes, I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people didn't know how widespread political betting actually is.
Have you ever taken a political bet?
I have. I bet on Brexit. I bet on some leadership contest, and I've bet on the US presidential election. Yes, I did. Those are the only 3. I won all. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Nathaniel Ogani, political commentator in Westminster for us. I actually did, yeah. I didn't put much money down because I was quite young.
I put quite a lot of money on Biden winning last time.
Did you?
But the scandalous thing here was with the company I placed the bet with, they didn't pay out until after certification. So,
an outrage.
So I saw Biden win, and then there were months where there was sort of all the stuff leading up to January the 6th, where they were refusing to pay out until the Senate had actually passed certified the election.
They've got to make sure. They don't want to be dishing out the cash.
I was waiting for my money for months.
It's hard for betting companies to get the money back once they've paid it out, isn't it? Anyway, our reporter Sophie Reaper has been out and about asking you if the ongoing gambling scandal is affecting how they see their politicians.
Well, it would do if it concerns each individual person, yeah. We should have rights to say what's what or what we want to do. I shouldn't be stopped from what I want to do.
Well, I think you have to think about responsibility and integrity, and that's what we expect from politicians in this country at the moment. And a lot of people asking the questions whether they are being honest with us and things like that. So I think we should be concerned about it. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, it does. I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
And what is it about it that you think is wrong?
Well, they shouldn't be allowed to do it because it's all inside and nobody else can do it, only them.
It doesn't shock me, surprise me. No, not at all. It's just what they do. I think people now are not bothered whether they get caught or not.
Yeah, because there shouldn't be any scandals with government, if that's what what you're meaning, yeah? It's terrible, it's all wrong.
I expect it does. I think they should be setting an example, and they're not doing.
What about yourself?
Yeah, the same. I mean, you just don't know what goes on, and, if they try and get other people to stop gambling or whatever, then obviously everything should apply to them in Parliament. We've got to abide by the rules, haven't we? So why shouldn't they?
Seems most unimpressed this morning. But joining us now is former Labour MP Gloria De Piero, who's in the studio with us.
And a beautiful studio it is.
Thank you very much, indeed.
Every new day, this is about the only week that we're ever going to have. Every time someone new is in the studio, it's, isn't it a lovely studio?
Are you saying I'm predictable?
No, just we get to enjoy the studio anew each new day, which is just lovely.
But more importantly, have you ever placed a political bet,
No, because I am normal, unlike you two. I have never placed a bet on politics. But having the horses, that's what normal people
You were
do.
MP for 9 years. That's not normal.
No, but I still wasn't weird enough to go betting on political outcomes.
It is a bit
the Grand
sad,
National, yes. Perhaps a bit of Ascot. If I go and see the horses, that's what normal people do, not you two weirdos who always win bets. But this is it's actually... Because I think you are... very, very... You both have very, very good political judgment, right? You are both political junkies.
Thank you, Gloria.
And so I can see why you would place a bet, because you have good instinct. Well, the logic of that is, why should... if somebody who's interested in politics and happens to be a candidate and they go, I think I know what's going to happen, they're doing exactly the same as you, basically, but what we're saying is because if you're in the know and it's inside information, of course, that's completely different. But if you're doing it from instinct like you two were, I don't know, I'm struggling to get...
I think there has to be a difference, doesn't there, between betting on the election date when you've been close to the Prime Minister at the time and then just sort of saying, I might think that the election might be called in June.
Yeah.
There's a difference, right?
I mean, if I'd have bet on the referendum, I would have bet that we would have left. But would I have been... What would have happened to me? Would you have been discussing me? Saying, that Gloria De Piero, she bet...
Do you think that one of the issues here is that people believe that MPs are far more powerful and far more sort of close to how things are actually decided in this country than legislators actually are?
I thought this might be a one-day story, which was moderately interesting. If you had bet with inside information, which is the allegation not proven. But to be honest, what are we on now? It's like a week later, and we're still discussing it. I would I would prefer us to be debating
It's interesting
immigration,
you say that, though,
cost of living,
because it is predominantly an anti-Tory story.
Well,
so I thought it would be something that you'd be happy to have sort of drag out.
No, actually, I think it harms all the parties, because I know that, Keir Starmer today would rather the top story have been Labour's plans to, solve the GP crisis. Yeah. So actually, it's crowding out and it's suffocating all the things that might affect people's lives, and we're talking about this.
There are also 630-odd Labour candidates in this election. Can Keir Starmer say absolutely confidently that none of his candidates have been taking out bets about their own races or whatever? Of course, one has been suspended now. I think it's probably a risk for Keir Starmer if he goes too hard on this. A bit like David Cameron in the expenses row. Initially, he went out, look at all of these Labour MPs taking out all their expenses. Then it turned out a load of Tories were doing it too.
Well, the reason why Keir Starmer has had to act is because the Gambling Commission said there's a problem here. So it's actually... It was the sort of independent gambling commission that said, something odd is happening with the candidate.
All they did was any politician who's taken out a bet in the month of May, they're investigating. That seems to be the only simple rule that they've taken out here, which means that potentially a lot of innocent people, including potentially this Labour candidate, could be having their names dragged through the mud.
I don't know what to say about this.
Do you not think it's...
I just wish we weren't talking about it. I wish we were talking about the substantive issues that are going to affect people's lives.
We could talk about something else, seeing as we've got you here. Keir Starmer, he's been forced to deny that there'll be a lurch to the left if he gets into power. He said, no, I will not deflect from wealth creation, I think were his words. This was in an interview with the Daily Mail. Now, this is something that a lot of people are worried about. A lot of people getting in touch saying Keir Starmer is almost pretending to be a centrist. He backed Jeremy Corbyn. He said he would be a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn has tweeted out that Keir Starmer never raised any issues with him at the time. Whether that's true or not, who knows? Recollections may vary on that one. But this is a real worry for some people.
OK. I will say something, and I will make a very confident prediction here. And I hope you would appreciate that. Normally, I try to be, you know, if the Labour Party is doing something silly, I will raise it. I think the chances of Keir Starmer becoming a raging lefty when he's elected are zero. What? Honestly. I mean, sincerely. And I just genuinely would not say that if I thought, oh, there will be issues, there will be pressure. But he's a very cautious man.
Gloria,
I mean, just look at how he's run this election campaign.
How do you define raging lefty? Do you think... So I presume you probably think Jeremy Corbyn is a raging lefty and Tony Blair isn't. But there's a world in between them. Was Harold Wilson a raging lefty?
Is this important? He was a Labour Prime Minister who won 3 elections.
I guess
but here's the point, right? I think the media discussion has presented this false binary between Tony Blair and Jeremy Corbyn, ignoring the entire wide array of opinion in between.
Keir Starmer, I think is so close to the Tony Blair end.
Do you think that?
Sincerely.
So why was he all pro, you know, nationalisation of all sorts? Why was he so pro these left-wing policies, huge sweeping labour market regulations and the like?
He marched against the Iraq War. He took Tony Blair's government to court.
Well, that's not even a million people,
That's not necessarily a left-right issue.
He took Tony Blair's government to court when it proposed taking benefits away from asylum seekers.
That was his job.
He took that case on voluntarily. He boasted about that case when he stood to be Labour leader.
Look, Keir Starmer, you know, Tony Blair used to be in CND when he was a kid.
His dad was a Tory councillor.
What were you like?
I was I flirted with Trotskism when I was young. People grow up and smell the coffee.
I thought you were in Labour students.
Well, they're
the anti-Trotskyist
Yes, I joined the Labour Party before I went to university. And then I went to university.
She's done lots of things, Tom.
I was sensible by the age of 21.
Right.
I had a mad maybe 3 years between 18 and 21.
A funny 5 minutes.
No, I think lots of us go mad at that age.
What did you do that was mad, Tom?
What did I do? Far too many things. Far too many things. The less said about my teenage years, the better.
Yes, you know, maybe there's a few old YouTube videos. Well, I think this is the worry. This is the worry that Keir Starmer isn't necessarily being completely honest about everything, and that's what he's got to fight back against. You hear from the Labour Party often, you know, we need to win every vote. There are lots of undecided voters.
Absolutely.
There may well be a lot of people who say, you know what, I don't want a bit of change. I don't want change right now. I don't trust Keir Starmer. Do you think he's got the trust?
This is what I think. I think, having knocked on some doors, I think this is what I've sort of picked up. If I had to summarise the national mood in a sentence, it would be, we don't love you, but we think you deserve a chance. Mm-hmm. And so, and when there is that caveat, that's why I feel so confident that you're not going to get any weird shocks of the ones that you are predicting or worried about. Because this is a very cautious... Labour Party. They know it's not Tony Blair. I canvass for him as well.
It's a fair question to ask, though, isn't it, considering the changing position on many issues?
I just wonder. The parallels seem to me to be much closer to someone like Neil Kinnock, because everyone forgets how much Neil Kinnock did to change the face of the Labour Party. He changed 100%. The logo from a red flag to a red rose.
He did something much more, like some far more substantial things.
He kicked out a lot of hardcore militant activists.
Yes, and if I was normal, I wouldn't recite that speech that he gave to Labour Council.
Labour Council! A Labour Council!
And you'll listen.
Sending out taxis to round up...
redundancy notices.
To its own workers.
Well, yes.
Oh, my goodness, all these pointed fingers in the studio. It's all in good spirits.
And some very bad Welsh accents.
I've just broken the pretence that I was a normal person and had never placed a political bet by reciting a Neil Kinnock speech to like a 1988 Labour Party.
John says the problem with Gamblegate is that they probably used an app which will have your name, address, bank details, etc. They should have gone down to any run of the street high street shop and popped to bookies with cash. Yes, then they would have been tracked, right? They wouldn't have been able to be tracked. Or do you have to put your name when you go to the bookies?
Do you know what? I've never taken out a bet with cash at a bookie, so I don't know. But I would imagine you have to give them your name. I would imagine you have to have identification documents, and it's all registered with the Gambling Commission.
Ian says a politician should state their occupation when placing a bet. Then if a bookie wants to take a bet knowing that, then it's not a problem, in my opinion. And John says you can't ban politicians from betting, but they have to be careful. Like in this present case, if you are genuinely privy to information from which you could profit by means of a bet, you best be very careful about it. Do you know what? I think that is absolutely spot on.
I agree. What was his or her name?
That was John.
John is...
Because ultimately...
Get John in this seat.
Oh, absolutely. We've got an empty seat here. We should get John to sit here at the other end of the desk. But honestly, I mean, it is ultimately... What are we talking about? We're talking about betting companies potentially being defrauded. Surely it's the betting companies that should...
cheating.
The betting companies should be making these judgments, not anyone else.
Well, isn't the reason that we know about it because of the betting companies? I mean, I'm actually not certain, but that must be the reason we know about all these things.
I'm hearing that we've got some words from Keir Starmer now. He's been responding to this betting scandal during a visit to a hospital in the East Midlands. Let's listen in.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country with the sort of leadership that takes decisive action.
Have you personally made ever any sort of political bet, and do you think MPs or candidates should be banned from doing so in the future?
I've never placed a political bet. I only bet on the horses. So that's where I stand on this. And I don't think that we should be lured into thinking this is a problem with the rules. It's a problem with politicians. You can see from the reaction of the public that they know, straight away that what's been going on in the Tory party, this sort of insider dealing, is wrong. And that's where the problem is. And it's politicians that are the problem. And it's a leadership issue. How do you act when something comes to light?
Wes Streeting has admitted that Labour has lost women's trust. We had the comments from J.K. Rowling the other day. Do you concede, do you understand why so many women feel that they don't trust you, and how can you reassure them that you will protect their rights?
Look, of course, I want to reassure anybody as we go into the election so that they can have trust and confidence in what I hope will be a Labour government making material change for our country. We do have a strong record when it comes to equality and women's rights, made a material difference. We've got a lot more that we need to do. I think the more that we can conduct the debate in a way which is respectful of everybody's views, the better, and then we can pull together and go forward. And that's the way I've tried to conduct the debate and the way I'll continue to do so.
Right, Keir Starmer there, Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio, Gloria
It is my pleasure. I'm coming back after 2.
You are indeed, former Labour MP.
We'll be reciting more Neil King. I promise we won't be citing more Neil Kinnock speeches.
Please no.
We will not be.
I'll be driven to madness if I'm not already. Anyway, after weeks of poor weather, how are you coping with the hot weather?
Yes, are you keeping cool with an ice cream, staying near a fan, or just getting your tan on? Well, whatever you're doing, make sure to take caution as yellow heat health alerts remain across most of England, with temperatures expected to reach a whopping, an extraordinary and almost unimaginable 31 degrees this week. Can you tell I've been told I have to say this?
Do I sense a little sarcasm, young man? Well, our reporter, Ray Addison, is making us a little bit jealous today. He's having a day on the beach. Ray, once again, getting all the best jobs. How are things going down there?
Well, I've popped down to Bognor Regis's Esplanade. I think that might be French for, like, long pathway or something. I didn't look it up. But anyway, there's lots of people here. They're certainly enjoying it, and they are strolling in the sunshine here in Bog Bados, as some of the locals and the tourists like to call it. Now, the temperature was predicted to be around 24. I'm told it's more like 26 and feels like 27. So nice and hot, but nowhere near the 30 or 31 degrees that we were expecting to reach in some of the hottest parts of the country in central and eastern England. But people here certainly enjoying the pier. There's a jellied eel stall down there. They're enjoying the ice creams, and they are enjoying the beach and the beautiful water as well. In fact, earlier on I chatted to some of the locals and the visitors here to Bognor Regis and found out their views on our sudden heatwave. In terms of the temperatures, they're saying it could get up as high as 30, 31 degrees. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that is a bit hot for, you know, if you can keep in the shade, fair enough. But no, that's too hot. We're not used to it.
We always wear our hats and sunglasses, but we just don't go out unless we go out in the car. We don't go out until 3, 4 o'clock, do a bit of gardening, then have another rest, more water. So we're looking after ourselves, putting it that way.
Yes, it's gorgeous, and it's what it should be on the summer day. So, and lots of people are enjoying, you know, the early reasonable temperature, but it's great.
I thought nice, beautiful opportunity to take advantage of the warm weather and sunshine while it's here.
So we do know that these heat health alerts are in place across much of England. Of course, the NHS as well, saying that they were expecting major disruption. We've got the junior doctors' strike tomorrow from 9 a.m. Now, the NHS has been dealing with people coping with heat exhaustion, heat strokes, dehydration as well. And of course, the NHS telling people to make sure they drink plenty of water. There's actually not an ambulance station, but a place where lots of ambulances park up while they wait for calls. I can see 3 or 4 up there, and just behind us there's a bench with about 6 paramedics enjoying ice creams right now. So it would appear, just from this little anecdotal experience I can report to you now, that the system is not rushed off its feet right now, thankfully.
Oh, well, it looks like an absolutely beautiful day, and great to see so many people out and about with their sun hats on, sunglasses too, bit of sun cream and doing a bit of exercise, I saw as well. Thank you very much indeed, Ray Addison there in Bognor Regis. I was thinking about jellied eels. Have you ever had a jellied eel?
Often I think about jellied eels. I haven't had the pleasure, I have to say.
Oh, well, let us know if you enjoy a jellied eel at home. But anyway, just over a week from the general election, GBNews is bringing you all your coverage from across the political spectrum, of course.
Tune in tonight at 7 o'clock for an interview with the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Now, he's a man who could be the next leader of the opposition, if we're to believe at least some polls. But he's sitting down with our political editor, Christopher Hope, to discuss all the big issues of the general election, followed by full reaction and analysis from Camilla Tominey and her panel.
Yes, that's at 7 o'clock on GBNews. Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, for you, so tune in.
Well, we'll be live in Glastonbury after your headlines, and also we're still waiting on those words from Julian Assange. But that's all after your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning, the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father, and he was also greeted by his wife Stella, who he embraced. His lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. The Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, thanked the UK and the US for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment, his landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have been found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. The trial began in January after their daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. There had been a high-profile police search for the missing baby after the couple went on the run. Both now face a retrial on other charges. Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack denies having broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the general election. He becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. The Labour leader has given his view on the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
A man has been arrested in connection to the so-called honey trap plot that rattled Westminster. It's after an investigation related to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 35 minutes past 12. Now, it's finally here. Yes, it's the thing that we've all been waiting for, and I'm sure you have been on the edge of your seat waiting for as well.
Yeah,
Glastonbury Festival.
None of us are there. None of us are there. Yet, of course, we were waiting for it. But music fans are making the annual pilgrimage to Worthy Farm in Somerset for the epic headliners. It's the 54th year of the festival, and it's looking like it will be quite a hot one.
So let's speak to one of the revellers now, our very own South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody. And Jeff, what's the town looking like?
Well, that's where you're wrong. Unfortunately, I'm not one of the revellers. My job today is to stand in the bloomin' queue and report on the massive queue to go in. If only they'd have given me a ticket so I could report from inside, I've had a much better day. But here I am in the queue. I'm about a mile away from Worthy Farm at the moment, and you can see how far the traffic's snaking back as people are coming in. There's a very interesting vehicle just approaching. You'll see it go past me in a minute. But yes, there's all sorts of vans and coaches and all that sort of thing, trying to make the final bit of their journey. Emily Evis opened the gates as usual at 8 o'clock this morning. Normally she does it with her dad, Sir Michael Evis. He wasn't there today. He is a very old man now, but she was there as usual, opening the gates, and we're expecting around 200,000 people to turn up and take this journey and be here by tonight. The whole festival goes on until Monday. A lot of people have been complaining a little bit that the headline acts aren't quite up to snuff. Some people are saying, Coldplay, really? But, you know, they are a massive band. They've been a massive band since the early 2000s, so it is fitting they do Glastonbury. Maybe not the glory years when you would see Elton John and Shirley Bassey and, dare I say it, Jeremy Corbyn. There's been some real classics performing at Glastonbury over the years. Not so this year, but at least they've got the weather on their side. Temperatures today around 27 degrees, and even they're saying that it might get even hotter, up to around 31. So it's going to be a sweltering start to Glastonbury. But if you are going to Glastonbury and you miss the mud and the rain, don't worry, because we're expecting some rain a little later on in the week.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jeff Moody, revelling there in the queue, where I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of you throughout the day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Now, I made the mistake once, the first and only time I went to Glastonbury Music Festival, I made the mistake of being the designated driver.
Oh, no.
And you were sat with your foot on the clutch in a packed little polo I was, packed with all my friends, so much luggage. They were all, you know, enjoying a little drink on the way. I was the sensible driver there, you know, trying to make sure I don't bump into the car in front, because you move like a tiny few centimetres every time you start driving. And it was fine, though, on the way there, way back. Trying to get everyone to get back in the car. Trying to get everyone to get back in the car, Emily, and head on the way.
Rookie mistake. Yes. If you drive them there, get someone else to drive back. Divide the labour.
No, we didn't divide the labour.
Oh.
We didn't divide the labour. Anyway, in other news, more importantly, the Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, has said she will not shut up after David Tennant suggested she should at the British LGBT Awards.
Well, Miss Badenoch accused the ex-Doctor Who actor of being a rich lefty, white male celebrity so blinded by ideology when she was writing on Twitter earlier. Now, Tennant, who won Celebrity Ally at a ceremony on Friday, received cheers and applause when he said that the Conservative minister, he said this of her: "I don't wish ill of her, I just wish her to shut up."
He also said he wishes that she disappeared or something like that anyway, or didn't exist. The Prime Minister has actually hit back at Tennant, writing, "Freedom of speech is the most powerful feature of our democracy. If you're calling for women to shut up and wishing they didn't exist, you are the problem." Well, there you go. Even the Prime Minister has launched in to defend Kemi Badenoch. But joining us now is GB News presenter Albi Amankona. Now, Albi, I've noticed you've been furiously tweeting about this.
I have.
On social media. What is your take? Is David Tennant in the wrong here?
Yes, I think David Tennant is in the wrong. Look, the trans and gender ideology debate is a very fraught debate. We've all engaged on it here, all three of us together, I think, at some point. And what I really hate is when someone on one side of the argument says, "shut up," to someone on the other side of the argument. Because actually, if you listen to people, there are valid concerns that people have, and we should be able to discuss them without saying, "Oh, I wish you didn't exist. Shut up. You're a transphobe. You're a bigot. Off to the tower with you." We're not going to have any sort of sensible debate and solutions to what has become quite an intractable issue recently when we speak about each other like this.
I agree with you, Albi, that telling people to shut up is rude. It doesn't make for good debate. But is everyone here being a bit of a snowflake? I mean, does the Prime Minister really need to get involved if some celebrity tells a government minister to shut up? I mean, don't we live in a free country where, OK, if some people are going to be rude, they're going to be rude. But, I mean, that's not against the law.
Of course, but I think it's clever politicking, because I would imagine most people agree with Kemi Badenoch and most people agree with Rishi Sunak on this issue. Now, if you're asking me, do I think this is the most important issue crossing either of their desks just a week before an election, basically 10 days before an election? No, of course it's not. But it's politicking, and I think it's quite clever politicking in what has been a very bad election campaign.
Interested to get your view on this, though. Kemi Badenoch has had some criticism from natural allies of hers, saying that she shouldn't have used white man as a pejorative. That's playing into identity politics, which she usually rallies against.
Emily, white liberals are the worst. They are the worst kinds of people on these issues. They're so virtuous about things, they're so irritating about things, so I can completely understand.
You're going to get yourself cancelled saying something like that.
Well, it's true. I can understand why Kemi Badenoch wants to call out white liberals on Twitter, because they come for me all the time. They come for Kemi all the time, and so we're coming for them.
Kemi Badenoch always quotes that marvellous quote from Martin Luther King, that she wants people to be judged on the content of their character, not the colour of their skin. Is she not doing precisely the opposite in speaking out against people and even mentioning their colour while doing it?
Well, she didn't just criticise him for his protected characteristics. Actually, that's not a protected characteristic, is it? She didn't just criticise him because of his identity. She criticised him because of the stance that he is taking on what is really quite a serious issue. And actually, I think highlighting the hypocrisy that if someone like David Tennant were to tell Diane Abbott to shut up and that he wished she didn't exist, there would be many on the left who would say that is a racist comment. So I think Kemi quite cleverly played the left at their own game and beat them.
Yes, I think she was probably purposefully using his language, as it were, using the language of the progressive left. To try and attack him at his own game, to win him at his own game. How does this play out, then? As you say, Diane Abbott has actually come out in support of David Tennant, hasn't she?
I think it's Dawn Butler that actually come out in support of David Tennant. Look, how does this play out? A lot of it's playing out on Twitter. Do I think this hubbub over this issue is going to impact how anyone votes next Thursday? No, I don't think it will. We do know that the trans issue is something that a lot of people care about, but I don't think the Business and Trade Secretary having a spat with the former Doctor Who is going to change how anyone votes next Thursday.
No, it does seem that sometimes this debate has an outsized scope in general, because people who are in the media sphere, perhaps, have it higher on their register of interests than the average voter does. Whenever you look at a survey of what are the biggest issues people are voting on, it's the economy, it's immigration, it's the health service. I mean, issues to do with single-sex spaces or transgender rights or whatever, they're way down the list.
That's not to say it doesn't matter to some people, and I do know, because I've been speaking to Tory activists who've been out campaigning, that issues around the Cass review, for example, have been coming up on the doorstep. So it might not be the #1 issue on people's minds, but I would just caution against saying this isn't something anyone cares about, because politicians wouldn't be spending their time...
You like to downplay the salience of this issue, but to a lot of women, and that's last time I looked about 51% of the population, it is an issue, particularly when it comes up with relation to prisons, particularly when it comes up with relation to single-sex spaces, particularly when politicians are asked, you know, what is a woman? It really drives a lot of women round the bend when politicians equivocate on that question, and I think that is something that does stick in the mind of women. Of course, things like the cost of living and the NHS are going to be highest up when it comes to policy preferences and all of that. But I do think it's something that women do keep an eye on.
The polling shows that more men care about it than women.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
The polling does say that.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Well, it's what the polling says.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think females feel more strongly.
But it's what the polling
I think
says.
females who are motivated by this issue probably feel more strongly than men, because they are the ones at risk with single-sex spaces not being single-sex. But anyway.
Well, as they would see it. But I think it is interesting.
Well, no, not as they would see it.
But I think it is interesting that you do have that strength of feeling, which, Emily, you rightly describe, in someone like J.K. Rowling, who I think sounded a lot more moderate on this issue even 3 or 4 years ago.
She did.
And is literally telling people to vote for the Communist Party of Great Britain because they prioritise gender issues above the state of the economy, above literally anything else in this country. I mean, it's a form of radicalisation.
That is quite nuts. Look, JK and I have had our spats on Twitter, so I am aware that she has become a lot more radical on this issue recently, and I don't think that is necessarily particularly helpful. Equally, I don't think it is helpful when people like David Tennant say someone who has a different opinion to me on this gender issue should shut up and cease to exist.
Yes, the cease to exist bit was quite incredible, actually. But thank you very much indeed, Alba Party. Always great to speak to you on all matters, really. GB News presenter, of course. Saturday 5 this Saturday?
Absolutely.
Well, tune in.
Around this desk, which can now seat 5 people without having to sort of, you know, lean forward to see anyone else. No, marvellous. I promise that's the last time we're going to talk about the new studio. We're all just very excited.
Well, coming up, we're going to have more on Gamblegate. And should we now just stop booing, stop being nasty, and back Gareth Southgate at the Three Lions? Or do you think they deserve the criticism? Anyway, that's to come shortly.
The latest GB News travel. It's all cleared now for the westbound side of the M58. An earlier broken down vehicle saw delays at the Oral Interchange Junction 26. That's been removed and all lanes reopened. It's very slow for London and Hertfordshire for the clockwise side of the M25. Severe delays after an accident from Enfield at 25 through to Junction 27. Delays at Potters Bar at 24. Anti-clockwise, the queues are from 27 to 26 for Waltham Abbey. Southbound on the M5, there's queuing traffic and 2 lanes are closed at Wellington, Junction 26. It's due to fuel spillage. And finally, the southbound side of the M6, that's slow as there is a lane closure in place whilst a vehicle has a tyre changed from Woolston through to the Lim interchange. That's your latest. You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We're very lucky to have an heir to the throne who is dutiful, loves his family, and he still takes all the children to school in the morning. And you can't really hope for anything more than that, can you? And he's behaved with such dignity. He must be so worried about his father and his lovely wife.
I wonder what the royals are going to do if the next generation of people aren't armed forces, if they don't join the army or the navy or the air force or whatever.
This is very interesting because Prince William doesn't necessarily want little George to do that. He doesn't feel it's necessary. But it's such a stamp on the royal family, isn't it? And with all the costumes, and they're the head of the army. And so what would they do without that? I find that very difficult. I think it's the same with religion, actually, because he's not religious, William. He does go once or twice a year, but he hasn't got the same passion about religion that King Charles does. And I think it's very difficult. I think it'll be maybe a very changed royal family.
Indeed, yeah. We don't know yet who's going to be attending Royal Ascot, but we suspect at the very least the Queen, probably the King and Queen, and maybe even the Prince of Wales as well.
You can't keep the Queen away from horses. I mean, she absolutely loves them. She used to ride them non-stop when she was little. And fascinatingly, her mother never bothered about it because they weren't mobiles then, and she would go off riding for hours and sleep in a field.
Life. What an incredible
childhood. And then come back the next day. She never worried about her. She thought she was sensible. She loves animals, dogs and horses. That's one of the things she had very much in common with the late Queen.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes to 1. And joining us now is the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield. And Maria, we want to get stuck in, dive straight in to this big issue that more and more people seem to be caring about. Why are quite so many politicians being caught up in a bizarre betting scandal?
Well, you know, it's very disappointing because it does take away from the core issues of the election. We've got a really important choice to make as a nation about who leads this country for the next 5 years. I think all political parties, certainly the Labour Party last night, other members who are not politicians are also being involved. And I think it doesn't, on the doorstep, it's not coming up a huge amount, I have to say, but there is a sense of disappointment that this is the focus for some people during the election period when there are such important issues that people want to talk about, such as the NHS, education, the economy as a whole.
Have you ever placed a political bet? I'm sure lots of politicians have.
I don't do political bets. I do bet on the horses. I've got Plumpton Racecourse in my constituency, and I'll often have a flutter on the horses, but not a political bet, no.
It is fascinating because, to some extent, I think a lot of people are in two minds. I mean, on the one hand, there are people that might have seemed to be close to the action and where it seems entirely inappropriate. But then there are other people who've taken very small, sometimes £5 bets and sometimes spread across many different outcomes. I mean, are too many people being drawn into this scandal? Is this becoming a bit of a moral panic?
Well, I think there is an element of that. I mean, you know, many of us didn't know the date of the election. I wish I had known the date. It would make life easier to have a bit of prior warning in terms of getting your campaign ready. But I think it's how kind of integral you are to that decision-making process, and then whether that's reasonable to put a bet on as a result. And also if an offence has been committed. And you know, there's an investigation going on with the Gambling Commission at the moment. Craig Williams feels he hasn't committed an offence. And I think it is right and proper to let that investigation take place to find out exactly who knew what and should they have been placing bets with any prior knowledge. But I think we can go to a bit of an extreme where, you know, everyone enjoys a flutter sometimes. And if people weren't integral to those decision-making dates, then, you know, is it a problem if they place a bet? I think that's a wider discussion for society as a whole to come to a conclusion.
Well, what do you think? Do you think it would be easier to just ban political betting outright for MPs? As far as we know, that's the case for footballers. They're not allowed to place bets. And also, other people who work in and around football, too, aren't allowed to place bets on outcomes in football matches. Should it be the same for MPs? Or parliamentary candidates, politicians?
Yeah, I'm not one for legislating just for the sake of it. But, you know, in other kind of walks of life, so, for example, if you were in stocks and shares, you can't do insider trading. If you know that a merger is coming up, that's taken very seriously. So I think we do need to look around at the rules. You know, the Prime Minister has taken action and withdrawn support for any candidates who've been caught doing this. I think it's something to look at after the election and take stock of that. But just introducing a law for you know, to make people feel better I'm not sure that that's the most appropriate course of action, but certainly some guidance and guidelines in place, and some tough action if people are aware of information that's not privy to everyone else, and then to put bets on it. I think that's a slightly different sphere. But if we're asking footballers, for example, I'm an Arsenal supporter. I often think sometimes have they thrown a game when they've played really badly. There is strict rules for footballers. There's strict rules for city traders, for example. And I think some guidelines for political parties and candidates wouldn't be a bad thing.
Now, I've only got a few more minutes left, so perhaps it's time to get on to the more substantive issues of policy in this election campaign. Because at the start of this week, the Institute for Fiscal Studies said that you're not being honest with the British people and the Labour Party isn't being honest with the British people. Whoever gets in next week is going to have to either hike up taxes or cut spending.
Look, we've been criticised for a number of months now about the high tax burden in this country, and Rishi Sunak was pretty clear when he stood as leader of the party that we have to be really sensible about how we get tax cuts in. You know, we can't borrow to give tax cuts because that just drives inflation. And I think, you know, what we've said is we're taking a sensible approach. Once inflation is down, interest rates are starting coming down, that is the time for tax cuts. We're doing that with our national insurance cut, and roughly people are about £900 better off a month because of that, and we will go further after the election. But we will do it in a responsible way. We will not do it by borrowing money, by driving inflation to go back up. And I think Rishi has shown that he can do both. He can get inflation down, get the economy back on track, and give people tax cuts and invest in public services. You know, we've got £190 billion a year going into the NHS. And what I would like to see and what we want to do after the election is to drive through those efficiencies. So it's not about just spending more money. It's getting kind of better services, living within your means as well.
And Maria, just very quickly, Labour are talking about ending the 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments. It is crazy that there is still a scramble. I mean, after 14 years of Conservative government, should we be a little bit more evolved than this?
Well, I think, you know, you have to look at the structure. And of course, the easy thing to say is to end the 8 a.m. Queue, that you're 45th of the queue and you phone up at 8 a.m. We have tried to do that, but people need to realise that GPs are not directly employed by the NHS. They all run their own practices. We've made available to GPs new telephony systems where they're IT-based and you can call back people, you can press 1 for prescriptions, 2 for appointments, all of that sort of thing. Now, not all GP practices have taken those up. The ones in my constituency that have dramatically reduced those call times and have made it a lot easier for people. But we can't force GP practices to do that because they are independent providers who work for the NHS. And I think that's why we need an honest conversation about the NHS. It isn't simply about forcing people to do things within the NHS. It's about looking at the structures and how we can improve it. But there's still that service available to any GP practice in England.
Maria Caulfield, we'll have to leave it there, sadly. Thank you very much indeed, Health Minister. Thank you very much. We're going to be back at Glastonbury soon after this short break. Let's have a little look at the weather, though.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance Card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe, and only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of June. I'm Emily Carper.
And I'm Tom Hull.
Now, as the heat rises across the United Kingdom, today is expected to be one of the hottest days of the year so far. We're feeling the heat in Glastonbury.
And the temperature is turning up on top politicians too. 3 parliamentary candidates from the 2 major parties have now been suspended over the betting scandal. Should politicians be banned from betting?
And it was a bit of a disappointing night for the 3 Lions in Cologne as England's sluggish performance eked out a score draw. But were fans right to boo the team, or should we just get behind them? Now, this is our debate of the day, I think, actually. Yesterday's match, last night's match. Again, a rather dull match. Lots and lots of criticism. Lots and lots of criticism of the team.
Some booing.
Gareth Southgate. Yes, some booing. Some throwing of plastic cups.
Yeah.
Do you think this helps? Do you think this helps their performance as a team? Or do you think they deserve some criticism when they're not up to scratch? I mean, they have all the support and hope of a nation to do as well as they can. They're paid huge amounts of money to play football. They train all the time. They have so much support. And then when it comes down to it, a lacklustre performance.
But does that performance, to some extent, correspond with the level of support? Does animosity breed and beget worse performances? Is what they actually
I can't help but laugh at your phrasing there.
What's wrong with that?
You make me chuckle. You do make me chuckle, Tom.
No one's amused.
But it's a good question. It is a good question. If you're rude and nasty about the team when they don't do particularly well, are they likely to get better as a result? I mean, if I'd done a presentation or something and I was told it was absolutely awful and I had a presentation the next day, would I be better? Would I up my game as a result? Or would I focus on the negatives and just, you know, be even worse?
Basically what we're asking, it's the age-old debate, carrot or stick. What does the England team need? Please do get in touch with your comments. Visit gbnews.com/your say to get involved. Carrot or stick?
It's your headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella, who he embraced. Stella has since spoken to the public in a press conference this afternoon, and she says Julian will need time to rediscover freedom. Julian's lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech, though. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thanked the UK and the US for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have been found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. The trial began in January after their daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. There had been a high-profile police search for the missing baby girl after the couple went on the run. Both now face a retrial on other charges. In other news, Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack insists he hasn't broken any rules after admitting to placing 3 bets on the date of the general election. The Cabinet Minister says he had no inside knowledge of when the election would take place, despite previously revealing that he'd made more than £2,000 from the bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Tories have taken too long to deal with the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
However, Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride says the Conservatives had to establish the facts before taking action.
I think it was absolutely right that the party made internal inquiries and has now come to a very clear conclusion, which is that those candidates are suspended. They will not be supported by the Conservative Party during this general election. And if indeed in the course of time they or any others who are candidates are found to have broken the rules in relation to betting, then they will actually be removed from the Conservative Party. So I think the Prime Minister has been very, very clear. He's very angry about what has happened. I am deeply disappointed about a number of the things that have happened here as well, and that is why action is being taken.
Early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become a thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. And the Liberal Democrats have announced a plan to give every cancer patient a dedicated specialist nurse to support them throughout their treatment. It would see nearly 3,500 new nurses recruited across England, doubling the existing workforce by the end of the next Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davey, says it's a crucial step towards fixing the NHS.
Cancer waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many, many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1, or indeed 8 minutes past 1, as it is now. Sir Keir Starmer has spoken about the growing political scandal around election betting.
Yes, the Labour leader says he'll remove anyone who's implicated.
It all comes as Labour's Kevin Craig joined Conservatives' Craig Williams and Laura Saunders in the growing list of budding MPs disowned by their parties in the last 24 hours.
Yes, well, Cabinet Minister Mel Stride has also spoken out, saying that politicians shouldn't bet on elections. But there remain questions on how many more might be dragged into this pre-election scandal.
Well, joining us now from the Labour battle bus is our very own political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, let's hope the signal holds up. We've had about a 50-50 success rate in the past. But how does this scandal break down?
Yes, hello, Tom and Emily. We are in Colville in Leicestershire. We were at a GP's surgery because that is what Labour, Sir Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, want to be talking about, ending the 8 a.m. scramble. But of course, it's not working out like that, is it? Because all the talk is of Gamblegate, as it's now being dubbed. And Sir Keir Starmer was asked, having suspended Kevin Craig very quickly as a Labour candidate yesterday, that if he was confident there were any more candidates that might have placed bets, and he basically said, if there are any more, they will be suspended. And we asked him too if he'd ever placed a political bet. He said that he never had. He'd only ever placed bets on the horses. But also he was asked too about whether he felt perhaps politicians shouldn't be allowed to place political bets. He said he didn't see any need for the rules to change. But although Labour have run into a bit of trouble with this, given that Kevin Craig, allegedly bet against himself winning, it's on a rather different level. If what's in the Conservative Party, which of course began with alleged inside knowledge, basically.
Catherine, we got through so much of that without the signal breaking up. But I think, actually, let's give it one more go. I think it looks like it's stabilised. Do carry on.
So, so with the Conservatives, there are now 5 being investigated by the Gambling Commission. 2 of them were candidates. They've been suspended. And Craig Williams was the first of those. Now, it took the Prime Minister 2 weeks to suspend him, I think partly.
Right, I think we'll leave it there. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. We're just going to in and out, but we'll catch up with you in a little bit. Catherine Forster, our political correspondent. We got the gist.
We got most of that, actually. I mean, in terms of, the number of crosses we've done to these battle buses in the last 3 or 4 weeks of this campaign, I don't think... I'm trying to think of a single one that has gone without a single hitch, and I don't think I can.
I think we've had a few with Olivia Utley that have kept going.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? Have you noticed that the line seems to be from our politicians who are asked about this? I've never placed a political bet, but I've dabbled on the horses. That seems to be a line. Do you
think they focus groups it?
Yeah, maybe, because it seems as though that's the line. I mean, there's so many other things that you could place bets on, but it seems to be only the horse racing.
Although, Ed Davey, in the last hour, the leader of the Liberal Democrats has said he has, in fact, placed political bets on Liberal Democrat candidates in the past, although never on a race that he himself has stood in. Shall we join now the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti? Because, Aubrey, I don't think politicians really saw this scandal coming in the way that it has. Perhaps it wasn't seen a week ago to have been this cut-through story that it became.
That's right. And actually, speaking to MPs, you get varying different opinions on how much this story is cutting through and indeed costing them on the doorstep. There are some Conservatives who say it is bad, but the sorts of voters that it's turning off are the sorts of voters that have basically left us anyway and see this as a reinforcement of all of their concerns about the sleaze and scandal that's engulfed the Conservative Party for years, ever since Partygate and some of the issues that arose beyond. Then there are others who say, actually, the real issue here was that Rishi Sunak took too long to suspend support for these candidates, that he showed a lack of political judgment in trying to sort of show strength, and that he had some kind of blind spot and was potentially too loyal to Craig Williams, who was, of course, his very close aide, advisor and friend. So I think ultimately this scandal isn't coming to hurt political parties too much, but it is certainly having cut through.
Yes, Aubrey, I mean, to be honest, we're getting a lot of messages in from our viewers and listeners saying it's only a big story, it's only a big scandal, because you journalists keep harping on about it and you keep asking politicians about this betting stuff instead of asking them about the bread and butter policies that we care about. There's probably a little bit of truth to that, no?
Quite possibly. I mean, we're basically in a quieter period in the election campaign where both main parties now, and indeed all of the other parties, have released their manifestos. They have been accused of refusing to engage in the substance of discussions, for example, about potential tax rises that might be necessary or spending cuts, or whether they might have to increase debt in the next parliament. So journalists are still absolutely focused on those questions as well. I think it's probably just a slight vacuum. The polls aren't moving. The manifestos have been released. This is a running story. The Prime Minister only took his decision yesterday. So that's why I think some people feel as though it's been dragged out by the politicians rather than the press.
Sometimes it feels like the collective press pack is like a metaphorical cat chasing various laser pointers. And we had the laser pointer that was Nigel Farage for a week or two. And then it was Ukraine, and now it's betting. And suddenly another laser pointer will come along, and almost the undivided attention of Britain's esteemed press lobby will just sort of switch to the new colour, to the fancy, shiny thing.
Quite possibly. I mean, journalists sometimes are a bit like magpies. You know, we sort of see the shiniest thing in front of us. But again, I do think that there is a real breadth to the coverage. There's lots of scrutiny, for example, of Labour's plans on the assumption that they are going to come into office in, what is it now, 8 days' time. So there is a great deal of scrutiny being paid to the policy as well as just the large P politics.
Now, The Times, Aubrey, does a lot of work on the issue of transgenderism and the potential conflicts maybe with women's rights. How much are you finding that that's playing with your readership? How concerned are people about this issue? I mean, Starmer's been asked so many times about this issue. He's given a bit of a vague answer in the past. What's the feeling about that as an issue?
I think Keir Starmer realises that this is a debate that has become more salient, and that his original answers on this subject have provoked some concern, not least from a Labour MP, Rosie Duffield. In the last week, of course, J.K. Rowling, the famous author, wrote to The Times saying that she was really concerned about Keir Starmer's stance on this, and there's been a new battle picked between Kemi Badenoch and David Tennant. I think that goes to show the breadth of concern about the debate, but I suppose David Tennant hasn't helped himself by telling Kemi Badenoch to shut up and saying that he wished she wasn't around anymore. I think all politicians have basically said that this debate has become sometimes too confrontational, too toxic and heated, and so, you know, they're very happy to talk about it, but they would rather do so from a position of mutual respect, and it doesn't seem as though David Tennant was showing that to Kemi Badenoch.
No, it's interesting to hear the words from Keir Starmer in this election campaign. As you say, there does seem to have been an evolution, a shift in the rhetoric, but not just the rhetoric, on policy as well. The Labour Party in Scotland, of course, voted in favour of self-identification, and now Keir Starmer has sort of come up with this halfway house position whereby, in order to obtain a gender recognition certificate, transgender people will not have to go through the current panel of doctors and lawyers as exists now, but simply one specialist doctor, although not self-ID. Is he at the risk of sort of standing in the middle of the road on this issue?
Well, I mean, sometimes standing in the middle of the road is the right place to be, and it sort of depends on how you take a view about both sides. I think in this instance, he does understand that there are very strong feelings, not just within the Labour Party, but amongst voters as a whole. And he wants to get to a position where he can try and ensure that the rights of transgender people are extended and that they are supported, given that they face much higher percentage in terms of like the chance of being committed a hate crime against, or potentially killing themselves as well. You know, there's a real kind of health and mental health aspect to this as well. And he doesn't want to pit those sort of rights, trying to increase support for them, against women's rights. Now, how you find that middle ground, I think, will probably be one of the big talking points of the next 6 to 12 months. But he is trying to adapt this sort of strategy where he doesn't defend either side and ultimately tries to show compassion. Whether or not voters believe it, given that he has in the past been, I think he said that it wasn't right at all to say that every woman didn't have a penis. I think he said it was 99.99% of women who don't. And now he's been much more categorical and said after Tony Blair that he agreed with the former Prime Minister and women are people that have a cervix. But he's going to come potentially unstuck for his previous comments. It's about the policy.
It's going to be very difficult, actually, because, I mean, the government and various ministers have been working on guidance for schools for God knows how long. They've been talking about this issue and the interaction between women's rights and transgender rights for so long now, and it still seems to be that there's no sort of consensus on what the policy should be and where the issues are really. Not your paper, but I'm sure you've seen an interview with Keir Starmer in the Daily Mail. He was asked whether he may lurch to the left, further to the left, if he is elected. This is an issue for Keir Starmer. There is some distrust, particularly over his support for Jeremy Corbyn. Has he suddenly changed into a centrist overnight? Is that something that we'll hear more from? Well, we haven't got many days left, but I'm sure the Conservatives will want to make more of that.
It certainly is. It's one of the Conservatives' almost two main points of attack in saying that quite clearly in black and white, 4 years ago when he ran for the Labour leadership, he made pledges like abolishing university tuition fees and renationalising water, mail and rail. He has adopted a very different stance and U-turned on a lot of those promises. Now, he argues that the economic situation, if you like, has changed. It was crashed by Liz Truss in October 2022, and so a lot of the things he wanted to do 4 years ago simply aren't doable anymore. But for somebody to change their politics seemingly so quickly, that is the opportunity the Conservatives spy to paint him as a flip-flopper, as somebody who's untrustworthy. And therefore, with a huge majority, he might return to those really rather left-wing instincts, they think. And that's being used as an argument to corral people to get out and vote for the Conservatives so that there is that strong opposition, as they say.
It's almost reminiscent of that 1997 New Labour, New Danger strategy, the red eyes that were painted across pictures of Tony Blair. Not sure how successful it turned out to be in 1997, but Aubrey Allegretti, thank you so much for talking through those big issues on the campaign trail.
I think you are sure.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure.
I think you are sure. Yes, thank you, Aubrey. But it is just over a week from the general election. Maybe you've voted already, if you're doing the old postal votes. But GB News is bringing you coverage from across the political spectrum.
So tune in tonight at 7 o'clock for an interview with the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Ed Davey will be sitting down with our political editor, Christopher Hope, to discuss these big issues of the general election campaign. And that's not all. It'll be followed by full reaction and analysis from Camilla Tominey and her panel of experts.
He was out doing some CPR this morning.
Yes.
There's a clip going around of him, doing it to the theme tune "Staying Alive."
Staying Alive.
Which
because that's the beat that you're told to do.
Bum, bum, staying alive.
I'm being told we can get the video a little bit later, so that's something to stick around for. Absolutely. But yes, of course, 7 o'clock on GB News, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
But still to come, the three lions, or should we say the lame lions, harsh, 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 I didn't write that, have limped into the next stage of the Euros. Some fans booed the team's performance last night, but shouldn't we just be getting behind the team? We'll be joined by a former England teammate of Gareth Southgate's to get his view. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The University of Cambridge has told students to stop flirting with staff under a new policy banning sexual relationships with professors. The new rules, which come into force next month, beginning of July, include a warning against behaviour that could be interpreted as flirtatious. University staff have been told they must report any behaviour that could constitute a student making advances towards a personal, particularly intimate relationship with them. If you're a tutor, how do you interpret what is flirting and what is just sort of like having a bit of banter?
In fact, we've got to
Very nice trousers, by the way.
Thank you.
You see, you didn't even recognise.
Oh, I didn't.
Very well.
I think I'm blushing now. I'm blushing.
So, what's flirting? What's me complimenting your very well-fitting trousers? Yes.
Well, there is a line, because obviously when you're 18 and you go to university, it might be the first time you're away from home. It might be the first time that you're open to maybe a bit of a nightlife, social activity, drinking and all the rest of it. On the flip side, I know a couple who, the pupil ended up dating their professor, and they've been together for about sort of 15 years now. So I used to go after lectures with my professor and the whole seminar. We used to go to the pub afterwards, and I became very good friends with... she was a mature student. She was on the very, very far left of political... you wondered where that was going for a second, didn't you?
We're both breathing a huge sigh of relief.
Very quick for you, Jo. We're running out of very nice trousers as well. We're running
Thank you. Not as snug as Charlie. I think you've got to have some rules in place that there's no abuse of power. Policing it's difficult. We ought to be in a position where you can say, get off, back off, or, you know, banter's fine. Actually, I hate that word. I hate it almost as much as woke. Go on, email in.
Thank you very much. I'm flirting with both.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 1. Now, England were back at it again last night in another thrilling contest against Slovenia.
Oh, yawn. We nearly all fell asleep watching that, didn't we?
Well, fans made their frustrations heard at the end of the game, booing the manager and the players off the pitch.
Well, despite the performance, England do top the group with 5 points, but are fans right to criticise the team's performances in such a way?
Well, joining us now is the former England footballer Danny Mills, who played with Southgate in the 2002 World Cup, and maths teacher and football enthusiast Bobby Seagull. So we've got a former player's perspective and a fan's view. But let's start with you, Danny.
Well, I think obviously we understand that performances are not where we want them to be. They haven't maybe been as exciting as we wanted. Players haven't performed. That has to be first and foremost. I have to look at maybe the reasons why that's happening, maybe several different reasons for that. I think the weight of expectation is starting to get to the players. Ever since in Gareth's first tournament, he didn't make the right decisions. We should have done better in that. We got to the semi-final for the first time for a long, long time. In the last Euros, we could have easily won it on a penalty. If we win that, all criticism goes out the window. 2 penalties get missed. That's it. In the last World Cup, it comes down to a penalty. If Harry Kane scores that penalty against France, we probably go on and do much better in the game. And obviously, we played very, very well in that game. So performances haven't been great. But we go into this tournament, and England fans and media we have some divine right that we should be winning this tournament. You know, we are supposedly the favourites. We're not. We are not the best team in Europe at the moment. You know, our squad is lopsided. It's weak in certain areas. But we seem to think that if we do not win this tournament, it's an absolute disaster because we have some good attacking players. We've always had that. And it just looks like at the moment that expectation is starting to weigh heavily on the players. The young players, they're making some bad decisions at times. They look like they're playing with a little bit of fear as well. And that's not good. And then whether the fans are booing Gareth Southgate or whether they're booing the players cannot differentiate from that. So England have topped the group. They go into the next round, into the knockout stages, and they're being booed by their own fans. Yeah. Let's not forget that when Spain won the World Cup, they lost their opening game of the tournament. Last time out, when Portugal won it, they didn't win a single game in 90 minutes. Does anybody care about that? No. OK, we need to now perform. So judge England on the knockout stages, not on performances so far.
All right. Well, Bobby Seagull, expectations might be a little too high, and it doesn't help booing the players.
First of all, it's a pleasure to be on the same
Paul as Danny, big fan of yours. So as a fan, and again, I was lucky enough to go to the England semi-final against Denmark in Euros and the final against Italy. And I would say that fans, they invest a lot of time and money. They're traveling abroad, emotional energy. And I think again, as a West Ham fan, what we always expect our players is just to give it their all. And again, if you look at the context of our team, we've got the La Liga player of the season, we've got the Premier League player of the season, the top scorer in the Bundesliga. And again, yesterday we were playing Slovenia, who are ranked 57th in the world. I know international football is different, but they're sandwiched between Iraq and Uzbekistan. So obviously, international football is very different to domestic football. But what we as England fans want is our players to give it their all, which they seem to be doing, but playing attacking, pressing football. And it seems to be that the players are playing quite cagey, they're quite on the back foot, they're very hesitant, as Danny mentioned. And I think that's where certain fans get upset, think I've gone all the way to Germany, given up, time and holiday money. I'm not getting the sort of effort that I think I deserve as a fan. So of course, the fans throwing cups, that's unacceptable. But booing, sadly, I think it's the reality of sport. Again, we saw in 2010 when England, I think there's a famous scene with Rooney getting, sort of pushing the camera away. And football, again, it's a high intensity, emotional sport. And if fans think that our players are not giving the all, and again, I think they are giving the all, but there's the perception is they're sort of holding back. I can see why it spills over into booing.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it, Danny? There's such an emotionally charged sport. Fans are paying huge amounts of money to go to the stadium. Fans are leaving work early to get there, to get to the fan section in whatever city they're in. They're really excited, and they want to know that their players for their country are going to give it their all, and it just doesn't seem that way, Danny. Do they deserve the criticism, surely?
This is what amazes me. Do you think any player, any person, any sports person in the world pulls on their national vest and doesn't give it their all? I mean, think about that. That's ludicrous. They know the amount of criticism that they will come in for. This is not that they're not trying. Things go wrong. Look at Rory McIlroy in the golf a couple of weeks ago. He misses 2 3-foot putts. He's one of the world's greatest players, but pressure gets to him. Expectation got to him, and he missed that. And loading these players, young players, that many of them haven't been in this situation before. I accept that we may have the Premier League Player of the Year, but he plays for Manchester City. He plays with top players in the world all the time. Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Erling Haaland, Rodri. Jude Bellingham is sandwiched. It has Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Vinicius Junior in front of him, Tony Rudiger behind that. These are different types of players. They are better than what's in the England team at the moment. So they have a different type of game, a different type of freedom. It's a different format that they're playing, different teammates. The players are trying. It's not quite working at the moment. But I've never understood, what is the point of booing the players? The fans want better performances. Do they think booing the players, whether that be the manager or the players thinking it's aimed at them, is that going to help the players?
But Danny,
you're a maths teacher. Would you boo your students if you didn't think they tried?
Well, let's throw that to Bobby.
Well, I guess the equivalent is I wouldn't boo my students. I think I'd be expelled as a teacher.
So therefore, why is it acceptable to boo the players? If you had a student that you didn't think was trying his all, would you boo him?
But Danny, there's alternatives. So in a class, as a teacher, the reprimands, punishments are maybe sanctioning them, maybe making them miss their break or lunchtime. And as fans, you obviously can't do that. So the only way they can express discontent, again, if I'm a fan, I've been to many games. I sometimes, if it's not a great performance, I might leave a few minutes early to avoid the traffic. But I can see why fans, if they've given up again time and money, if they're feeling frustrated, what's their outlet? Again, that's the thing. What's the outlet? Is it just
sport is about winning. Sport is about winning first and foremost. All professional sport at any level, it's not entertainment. There's not a single player, coach, goes out and thinks, I have to entertain. Sport is about, we have cup competitions, we have leagues, we have championships, all because it's about winning. First and foremost, if you can win in a wonderful way and you can play amazing football and entertain by doing that, even better. But first and foremost, it has to be about winning. So until England get knocked out of the tournament, it's very, very difficult to criticise.
Bobby?
Yeah, so Danny, on that, I think you're right. Football is a sport first and foremost, but the way the business has changed the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's become entertainment as well. Of course, sport number one, but fans feel as they're paying for an experience. And again, part of the experience is, I know you're right, players probably, I'm sure they give it their all, but the perception is it looks as if, these players, they're week in, week out performing at the top level in La Liga, Champions League, and yet when they play together, it's like, as a maths teacher, I tell 1 + 1 is 3 is synergy, but it feels like with our team, 1 + 1 is 0 or -1. So again, the perception, rightly or wrongly, is that our players are underperforming, and maybe booing's not the right way to get around, but I can't see what other ways would fans...
I'm not going to argue, Bobby, that they've underperformed and they've not played to their full potential. But I just wonder, I don't understand why people think booing is a good idea. Is that going to help? You know, you're clearly an intelligent person, sensible person. Is booing going to help those players in any way, shape or form? When they come into the next game, knowing that the fans have booed them previously, does that give them hope? Does that give them freedom? Or does that put more pressure on them?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Danny Mills, former footballer, of course, and Bobby Seagull, who is a football enthusiast. Thank you very much. Got the two sides there, certainly. I think that's a very good question to end with. You know, is it actually going to help anyone booing? It's just it's an outlet, isn't it, for people?
Yeah, let's get to Tatiana Sanchez in the news.
Tom, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Julian Assange says it is surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning: the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and also by his wife Stella, who he embraced. Stella has since spoken to the public this afternoon. She says Julian will need time to rediscover freedom. His lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech, though. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thanked the UK and the US for supporting the international effort. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have been found guilty of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. The trial began in January after their daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. Both now face a retrial on other charges. Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack denies having broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the general election. He becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. Spanish police have released new footage in their search for missing British teenager Jay Slater. It shows a helicopter scouring the mountainous area, with search teams on foot having been joined by sniffer dogs. The Guardia Civil say their efforts are not being scaled back. The 19-year-old went missing 10 days ago while on holiday on the Spanish island. And the trial of American journalist Evan Gershkovich is scheduled to continue on the 13th of August, in a sign the case could drag on for months. The Wall Street Journal reporter has been held in a Moscow prison for 15 months on charges of spying. Prosecutors say he was caught gathering secret information for the CIA, though no evidence for the allegations have been made public. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2655 and €1.1842. The price of gold is £1,829.56 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,225 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Hot and sunny once again for many of us today, 30 to 31 Celsius in a few spots. Not hot for everyone though. It will be cooler across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England. And by Thursday, this low sweeps in, bringing cooler weather across the whole of the UK. But for Wednesday afternoon, actually, for many, it's sunny skies. There will be some mist and low cloud around southwestern coasts and some North Sea coasts. And there'll be some thicker cloud there for Scotland, with a few heavy showers developing into the afternoon, primarily over the Grampians and the far north and northwest. Northern Ireland turns cloudy as well. 22 Celsius for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 30 to 31 Celsius for central and southeast England. Hottest day of the week and the last day of this hot spell before it turns cooler across the country. Certainly some heavy showers getting going into the evening across parts of central and northern Scotland, with some, well, gusty winds developing as well. Northern Ireland sees cloud rolling in, and for much of England and Wales we keep the sunshine into the evening and we keep that warmth as well. Even at 6 p.m, temperatures still close to 30 degrees, but we've got cloudier skies through the evening, edging into Western England as well as Wales as the change starts to take place. The cold front that brings the change is a weak feature, so it will bring some rain, but not much, to Wales and the southwest as well as Scotland overnight. The wind's picking up in the far northwest, but it stays warm across the Midlands, eastern and southeast England, with temperatures at dawn about 17 to 18 Celsius. Soon rising through the morning, but by this stage we're seeing the cooler air sweep eastwards, and so temperatures will be more limited as the cloud arrives into the afternoon. Sunshine replaces the cloud in the west, but with showers, and it will be unseasonably windy in the northwest.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to the southbound M6 firstly, junction 21 to 20. That's the turn off of Woolston down towards the M56 at the Lim interchange. All lanes back open, but still slow following an earlier vehicle undergoing a tyre change there. A fuel spillage, a lane shut southbound on the M5 in Somerset around Wellington 26, causing some delays. Southbound A1M just before the turn off of Baldock junction 10, very slow. The early obstruction, those gone. So again, all lanes back open. Clockwise M25 from junction 25 Enfield to the M11 junction 27 is currently closed. Queuing before junction 25, also slow anti-clock. A serious collision there being recovered. And the Rotherhithe tunnel in London shut both ways for emergency repairs.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:40. And as we were discussing a little while ago, the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey's entertaining election antics continue today with a musical rendition of CPR. Take a look. Harmless fun or ever so slightly distasteful?
I don't think that's distasteful. I mean, everyone should learn how to do CPR. But I have to say, we've got an expert with us in the studio. He's here for the next item. But during that, Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. Now, you trained as a vaccinator, Cameron.
I was, yeah, during the pandemic.
CPR, and you said Ed Davey was doing it wrong.
Well, I didn't say he was doing it wrong, Tom. I just said his arms look very bent towards me. But that song, "Staying Alive," is the rhythm you are meant to give CPR to.
Okay.
So there was a meaning behind that particular song.
But you're supposed to keep your arms sort of locked and straight.
Locked and straight, a little bit of a bend, but maybe not quite as much.
Not as much bend.
Yeah, but I'm certainly not an expert. I'll leave it to check on the NHS website.
So we shouldn't be too disapproving. We shouldn't be too disapproving of Sir Ed Davey. That is actually the tune that you're supposed to time your CPR with. Anyway, yes, joining us now is our royal correspondent Cameron Walker,
who's actually here to not talk about CPR.
Yeah, luckily there was no medical emergency inside Buckingham Palace last night when I was there, so it was all fine.
What did happen?
Yes. Well, it was a state banquet for hosting. The king was hosting the Japanese emperor and empress, along with other members of the royal family. Beforehand, I get to go inside and smell the food. I don't get to eat it. But it was poached Scottish langoustines, if you want to know, baked fillets of Cornish turbot, and an ice cream bomb with peach sorbet for dessert, and lots of vintage wine, as you do.
Only
5 glasses. Only 3 courses, but then you have 5 different wine glasses. For a toasting champagne wine glass, you've got red wine, white wine, presumably, and some others as well. Ports for after the dessert as well. But what struck me was looking at the seating plan and the different name tags on the tables. And what I noticed was the King's principal private secretary, Sir Clive Alderson, the guy who's in charge of the official communication line between the King and his government, sat next to Sir Keir Starmer, not the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was sat next to a computer scientist, and obviously we've all seen the recent polls, so I think perhaps it was a little bit sneaky of the person doing the seating plan to put him next to Sir Keir.
Is that a political move from Buckingham Palace?
Well, I'm sure the palace would deny any politics has been involved in this. Of course, the foreign official, I should say, of Japan has also insisted it's not a political visit. It's about forging certain relationships. But I think what we can say is it gave Sir Clive and the leader of the opposition a chance to have a chat for a couple of hours over dinner. Of course, nothing happens by accident, but all the elements of the state visit, which you'd usually have not in general election periods, such as the meeting in Downing Street, such as the speech in Westminster Hall in front of politicians, they are not happening. I should also point out that we had several cabinet ministers there who clearly are still ministers of the Crown, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Foreign Secretary David Cameron, Kemi Badenoch for Trade Secretary as well, and as we just saw giving CPR there, Sir Ed Davey, he was also at the state banquet.
Did he bring his dummy?
He did not. So we had politicians from across the spectrum, but I just thought it was very interesting placements of Sir Keir and the private secretary.
That is very interesting. I want to know, what champagne did they serve, Cameron? Do you have that information?
I've got Laurent, I can't pronounce this. Laurent Perrier Cuvée Rosé is the champagne they served.
Oh, what a treat,
yes,
eh?
and there was some vintage wine from 2014. And 2016 Chardonnay. So all the food, all the drink as well. Andrew Lloyd Webber was also there, a new Garter night, and some of his music, Phantom of the Opera, was played over dinner as well. A string quartet, though, so no singing, but it seems like a good day.
Doesn't look like there was a nod to Japan in the menu.
Well,
unless I'm mistaken.
Well, no, I don't think it was a Japanese dish, but of course the whole point of hosting somebody is you give them your traditional food. So that was perhaps why. We did have Japanese-style table settings. We had lots of flowers with perhaps a nod to Japan as well, and different table settings. But the roses came from Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle Gardens, who are being donated to charity today.
Now, when you had your special access beforehand and you got to sniff the food, I've always wondered this for the most powerful people in the world.
Yes.
Are there food tasters? Because back in the courts of old, Henry VIII would always have someone who tasted the food lest he be poisoned.
Yes.
Does King Charles have that?
Well, they do not comment, Tom, on security arrangements for the palace. I'm sure every chef in that building is heavily vetted before they receive the job, and I'm sure. But I do know that the King and the Queen, or the King at least, personally inspects the table settings before any guests comes in to a state banquet.
I'm laughing because you said lest they be poisoned. Earlier you said baguette. To beget something.
Yeah, to beget something to someone else, yeah.
And it's just, I haven't heard these phrases from you.
Do you think
Old English phrases?
Old-fashioned, is that?
Well, I mean, I don't mind. It's just a change. It's just a change.
Oh, goodness, I've been
and our producer did laugh in my ear. That set me off.
I've been reading too many classical novels. That's
no, why not? Why not, eh? But tell us, Princess Anne.
Princess Anne, yes. So her husband, Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, has been spotted visiting her in hospital this morning. He did not speak to the media outside the hospital. She spent her third night. She's awake. She's conscious. She doesn't remember what happened. So that is why we're getting the medical details. The information from medical staff saying her injuries are consistent with an impact from a horse's head or a leg, but she can't tell us that herself, is what I'm reading between the lines.
That would suggest that it's really rather serious, Cameron.
Well, it would suggest that she's got a concussion and minor injuries. That's what she was told. I don't think it's quite so serious. The reason being is because although an air ambulance was dispatched to the scene, she went to hospital via a road ambulance. So there was no urgency in getting her to hospital by the looks of it, because Gatcombe Park in Gloucestershire is quite far from the Bristol hospital she's in. But we do have to be mindful that she's in her 70s now. Clearly, she has had quite a big impact from a horse, and they'll clearly be monitoring her for any updates. But as it stands, the latest guidance we're getting is she is expected to recover and be out of hospital towards the end of the week. But we'll wait and see.
Well, Cameron Walker, thank you very much for talking us through those three enormous stories there. Not least the CPR. Well, still to come, we're heading to Somerset, where music fans are making their annual pilgrimage to Glastonbury. And there are no wellies in sight. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Giovanni is axed following growing allegations of threatening and abusive behaviour.
We won't see his little toes dancing around the dance floor again, which is a shame.
Was it the BBC saying, you know, we've had some bad publicity about this star, do we need to maybe let him go? Or was it Giovanni himself saying that, you know, he's had to, with all the bad publicity and what's the allegations against him, he's walked away? We don't exactly know. But what we do know is that Amanda Abingdon, who he was coupled with last year on the last series of Strictly, left claiming that she had nasty behaviour from him in rehearsals when they were training for their routines. And she's also been diagnosed with PTSD, which she is blaming or claiming happened because of the training that she was put under Giovanni. It's very sad because I've met Giovanni on quite a few occasions, and he comes across as a very nice gentleman, actually, and the fans absolutely love him. And even though the allegations are out there against him, everybody I speak to in terms of the fans are on his side.
I mean, from the fans' point of view, they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. All they see is an incredibly gifted dancer who we're seeing footage of now.
It might come out later, but there's all sorts of things coming out because after Amanda came out and claimed all this behaviour against him, a male celebrity last week also came out and voiced their opinion. Yeah, a lot of fans will be gutted, but as you say, we don't know the full story yet as what's gone on.
And it's incredible pressure that no one's allowed to be, a duffer right from the start now.
I mean, it's one thing learning lines if you're an actor, but it's a different kettle of fish altogether if you're learning moves that you've never done before. So you've got...
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes to 2. And do you know, it's finally here.
What's finally here?
Glastonbury's finally here. Yes, the music festival has begun and fans are making the annual pilgrimage to Worthy Farm in Somerset for the epic headliners.
Yes, it's the 54th year now of the festival and it's looking like it'll be a warm one. Make sure everyone drinks a lot of water. Our reporter Jeff Moody is there for us now. Jeff, what's the mood like? Lots of traffic behind you. Is the traffic moving? Well, yes, it is.
Well, you know me, I don't like to complain about my job. But when I was told I was going to be reporting from Glastonbury, I did kind of have the idea that I'd be inside, near the pyramid stage, VIP access, that kind of thing. Instead, I'm reporting on the traffic. There's traffic. There is very bad queues to get in, but that's the case with throughout this area at the moment. They're expecting 200,000 people to descend on Glastonbury in the next couple of hours. So all of the roads around the farm are gridlocked. We're about a mile away here, and it's as near as we can get without being completely immersed in the traffic. Many, many people that live locally are saying, you know, these few days are an absolute nightmare. You can't just pop to the shops. All the normal rat runs that people use are closed, no access. It is very difficult. Talking to people in Glastonbury itself this morning, they were saying that that trade is very brisk. They say that it's very much like Christmas, that they get lots and lots of trade, people stopping and getting some knickknacks and things like that, and snacks too. But the pubs say that they don't do very well out of Glastonbury. People tend to stock up on beers to have in the car, and then they go to the beer tent as soon as they arrive at Glastonbury. They don't have a drink beforehand. But the weather is certainly staying very nice. They're saying it's around 27 degrees at the moment, and they're expecting it to get a little bit higher too. But if you do come to Glastonbury and you do miss the mud, because most people go to Glastonbury for the mud, don't they? There is going to be quite a lot of rain later on this week. People have been complaining about the headline acts, Coldplay, Dua Lipa. Some people are saying, look, well, Coldplay had their moment many years ago. Why are they headlining Glastonbury? But then others are saying, look, the sun's shining, they've got a beer in their hand, they're listening to Coldplay. What can possibly be wrong with that?
To hear that there will be mud later in the week. It wouldn't be a proper Glastonbury without it. Jeff Moody there from the side of the road. Thank you very much for joining us.
I saw a TikTok, Tom, where people were asking this young influencer who was on his way to Glastonbury whether he was packing wellies. And he said unequivocally that no, you should leave your wellies at home and wear comfortable shoes. He said the last thing you want to be doing is, trudging around in wellies when the ground's, not damp. But perhaps he'll be eating his words.
Well, I'll teach you to take news from TikTok, won't it? Just over a week from the general election now, GB News is bringing you all your coverage from across the political spectrum.
So you know what to do. Tune in tonight at 7 o'clock for an interview with the leader of the Liberal Democrats. He'll be sitting down with our political editor, Christopher Hope, to discuss all the big issues of the general election, followed by full reaction and analysis from Camilla Tominey and others too.
That's at 7 o'clock on GB News. Leader of the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey. And if you're to believe some of the polls at least, perhaps the next leader of the opposition.
We'll be back in just a tick. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Botched Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's another hot one out there for many of us, and it is going to stay warm overnight. Love it or hate it, it's the peak of the heat today, and it is turning fresher from the west. As we go through the next 24 hours, as this unseasonably deep low approaches, that's going to turn things wetter and windier in places. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, we haven't got the hot weather at the moment. It's already turning more changeable here. And that cooler but more cloudy weather pushes into Western England and Wales overnight, along with a few spots of rain. Meanwhile, we keep the warmth across the Midlands, Eastern and Southern England. Temperatures overnight staying at 17 or 18 Celsius. So perhaps for some of us, another uncomfortable night for sleeping. But it's the last night with these high temperatures before the change starts to take place. And you can see the difference as we begin Thursday. 15 Celsius in the west, 20 Celsius with some sunshine in East Anglia. Across northern England, the sky's starting to brighten up, just a few showers clearing. Northeast Scotland sees some heavy downpours across the Northern Isles first thing. They do slowly peel away during the morning and early afternoon. Brighter skies for eastern Scotland, but for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's turning increasingly wet. And we've got some heavy showers with blustery winds, unseasonably windy in fact, during the afternoon across northwestern parts of the UK. That breeze coming in from the west will sweep the early cloud through, but return temperatures closer to average across the country. That means low teens in the south, but still the chance of a 25 or 26 degrees in the east of England, high teens further north, and not feeling very pleasant at all, where we've got the wet and windy weather across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's going to continue into Thursday night. Some showers for eastern Scotland, Northern England, but largely dry further south, and actually the weekend's looking reasonable. There'll be some sunshine around, temperatures a little lower, but mostly.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that. Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you. This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel. On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex, and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's approaching 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
As the heat rises across the United Kingdom, today is expected to be one of the hottest days of the year so far. We're feeling the heat live in Glastonbury.
Yes, we are. And the temperature is also turning up on top politicians. 3 parliamentary candidates from the 2 major parties have now been suspended over the betting scandal. Should politicians just be banned outright from betting?
And a disappointing night for the 3 Lions in Cologne, as England's sluggish performance ekes out just a score draw. But were fans right to boo the team?
Well, it's an absolute scorcher today.
It is.
I mean, we can't feel it here in the studio, but I'm sure as soon as we step outside, we'll be hit by a wave of heat.
Yeah, well, we used to feel it in the studio, of course, until they fixed the air conditioning. But no, it is actually feeling like summer has finally arrived, which perhaps we wouldn't be talking about it, and the country wouldn't be talking about it quite so much had we had anything other than a very, very dreary June for the first few weeks.
And immediately we're being told that thunderstorms are on their way, which is always nice, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't ever have nice things.
You can't ever have nice things. But we want to know how you're spending the day. Are you enjoying the sunshine? Did you sleep well last night with the heat? That's what the weatherman was saying. It was going to be a sticky night, unless you have a Dyson Air, whatever they're called.
Of course, people who live in developed countries generally don't ask these questions. Americans all have air conditioning, and indeed many European countries have air conditioning as standard. Here in this country, politicians have decided that it's the wrong thing to encourage new builds to have air conditioning. Don't know why. Country's getting hotter, no aircon.
You're very worked up about this one, aren't you?
The London plan, Sadiq Khan's London plan literally says new builds should do natural air cooling and should discourage air conditioning because it will pump out warm air to the environment. It's just a completely bizarre directive that no other developed country in the world goes down.
Just close your blinds, open the window, it's good to go.
I mean,
little damp cloth when you go to sleep.
Victorians anymore. There is modern technology that means we don't have to have a terrible night's sleep, and yet politicians discourage it.
Anyway, let's stop wittering on.
Yeah.
But do send your comments in. Let us know what you're up to. gbnews.com/your say. Perhaps you're off to Glastonbury, or you have a relative who is. Anyway, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end. A warning, the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. The Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thanked the UK and the US for supporting the international effort.
I do want to express my appreciation to the United States and the United Kingdom for their efforts in making this possible. He described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing here in our national capital, Canberra. He expressed his thanks to what he described as the diplomatic A-team when I spoke about the role that Kevin and Stephen have been able to play.
Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon have been found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. The trial began in January after their daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. There had been a high-profile police search for the missing baby after the couple went on the run. Both now face a retrial on other charges. Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack insists he hasn't broken any rules after he admitted to placing 3 bets on the date of the general election. The Cabinet Minister says he had no inside knowledge of when the election would take place, despite previously revealing that he'd had made more than £2,000 from that bet. He later dismissed that claim as a joke. Mr Jack becomes the 7th person to become embroiled in the scandal, with just a week until voters head to the polls. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Tories have taken too long to deal with the scandal.
I made very clear that if any of my candidates was being investigated in relation to the Gambling Commission, I'd remove them straight away, which is what I've done. That's in a sharp contrast to Rishi Sunak, who took days and days and days before he took action. There's a wider story here about the choice at the general election next week between carrying on with what we've had for the last 14 years or so. The inaction by Rishi Sunak is just absolutely in keeping with the way that they've governed for 14 years, or turning the page and starting to rebuild the country.
Spanish police have released new footage in their search for missing British teenager Jay Slater. It shows a helicopter scouring the mountainous area, with search teams also on foot, having been joined by sniffer dogs. The Guardia Civil say their efforts are not being scaled back. The 19-year-old went missing 10 days ago now, while on holiday on the Spanish island. In other news, early morning calls to GP practices in an effort to lock in limited appointments could become a thing of the past under plans to bolster the NHS app. Labour says its plan would see the app updated to encompass several health professionals, including GPs, physiotherapists and dentists, to make securing an appointment simple and easy. The party says 5 million people tried and failed to get a GP appointment every month last year. The Liberal Democrats have announced a plan to give every cancer patient a dedicated specialist nurse to support them throughout their treatment. It would see nearly 3,500 new nurses recruited across England, doubling the existing workforce by the end of the next Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davies, says it's a crucial step towards fixing the NHS.
Cancer waiting times are the worst they've ever been, and millions of people have had experience of this, either their loved ones or a friend. I lost both my parents to cancer, so this is very personal to me, but it will mean an awful lot to many, many people. So we've got to cut those waiting times, both for diagnostic but particularly for treatment, where we've not had much success under the Conservatives. And our idea today goes in line with our desire to increase the number of radiology machines, radiotherapy machines, and all the equipment that's needed to make sure we can have the best cancer care in the world.
And some royal news. The Princess Royal was visited by her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, today after spending a third night in hospital. Anne has been in Southmead Hospital in Bristol since Sunday evening after being hurt while walking on her estate in Gloucestershire. Sir Tim also spent time with his wife yesterday and accompanied her when she was rushed to hospital. The Princess is understood to have suffered some memory loss, meaning the exact circumstances of how the incident happened are not known, though she's believed to have been injured by a horse. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 2 and delighted to be joined in the studio again by the former Labour MP, Gloria De Piero. And Gloria, just before we came to you, we were talking a little bit about this honey trap scandal in Westminster because someone's been arrested today. And we were just talking about how baffling the whole scandal is, how easily some MPs seem to be drawn in to these WhatsApp messages.
Well, that's the really bewildering thing, isn't it? Because, you know, when you occasionally get a message on your phone saying, we couldn't deliver your package, please insert your details in that, you go, yeah, whatever. So what is quite extraordinary is that some people engaged with a sort of phishing expedition, sometimes some explicit pictures, thought, yeah, I'll reply to that. I mean, it's baffling, isn't it? Who knows how many they contacted to ignore them?
Well, this is the thing, yes. It only takes a few to sort of reply and then they end up looking very silly. But is this an issue, though, for politicians? You've been an MP, of course. What's it like? Do you feel as though there's constantly people trying to get things from you or try to find out things about you, your personal life? Can you trust people who just get in touch?
It's a good question. I tell you what I found the biggest, and I don't know if this is strictly related to it, but it's sort of something that I noticed. We all like to have a drink, don't we? But I was really... I mean,
no.
If anyone's surprised...
Who told you?
If anyone's surprised... But, you know, we enjoy a drink. We don't get drunk, but I was always conscious. I've always enjoyed going to the pub. Always liked a couple of drinks, but you could tell when you were up. I started drinking at home a lot more, rather than going, oh look, she's having another glass of wine there in the constituency pub, things like that. Well, just like particularly in your constituency, actually, you are public property. You know, you work for them, so you've got to. So maybe you wouldn't start banging out a karaoke track in. After a few Chardonnays.
Once said the moment she realised she was truly famous was when she couldn't go down to her local off licence in her pyjamas anymore.
Well, I am very pleased to be compared to Cheryl Cole.
In so many ways,
it may be the first and only time this is going to happen, but I will take it. I'm glad that neither of us could go to the local pub. I think that's where the similarities of our lives are.
But it's true, and of course politicians can be corruptible. Of course, we know that from various scandals in the past. You have to be on your guard.
You do, but, I mean, unless you're an idiot. I mean,
Gloria, you and I have met a lot of our MPs, and woe betide me to besmirch their image. But some of them are idiots,
yes,
aren't
but
they?
I would put, if you reply to one of those phishing texts, then you probably are in the idiot category.
Same with perhaps placing a bet on the general election date when you're privy to information.
Well, I suppose nothing's been proved on that, but the suggestion is that some people who may have been in the know were certainly very close to the Prime Minister put bets on as a result of having inside information. And obviously, if that's true, it stinks.
Yeah, well, this arrest that has taken place today, someone who lives in the Islington area is all that we know about this. Which sort of opens the net quite wide in terms of who it could possibly have been, and whether it was actually someone involved in politics or just sort of some third party trying to access politicians, and why would they be trying to get compromising material on politicians? Well, it opens so many questions.
Blackmail is one possibility, to get some money, to extract money from them, which I think actually William Ragg, the former Conservative MP, I think he did share some details on I'm trying to choose my words very carefully so I'm remembering correctly, on a gay dating app. And I think that was because had he sent... yes.
He did say that he shared some compromising material with this person. And then the reason why he ended up resigning as a Conservative was then he passed that person's number on to other members of Parliament, if I remember correctly.
And that was because he felt compromised. So, I mean, you know, this happens to ordinary people too. I guess women in particular, who are...
Well, actually...
But you don't pass on numbers of other politicians.
In particular, but I've been amazed by the number of recent suicides from young men who have sent intimate pictures of themselves to people that turn out to be sort of foreign gangs trying to extract and extort money. And there's been a case of a young boy in Scotland who took his own life after a Nigerian gang got him to send pictures of himself. There have been cases in America. It does seem to be a growing thing amongst young boys as well as young girls.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what you might do in public policy terms about that, because it is really, you know, it is really alarming. This has changed the lives of so many people in a way that, oh, actually, you two are young. So that certainly didn't happen when I was growing up.
I was thinking about this because we have these discussions about should we ban smartphones until people are 16. I was actually 16 when I got my first smartphone. But not because there was a ban or anything was particularly strict, it's just that's when they came about. It's a very interesting one for me. I can't imagine an offline life, but also I've sort of had that natural progression whereby the moment that you get the internet in your pocket is that moment that we're now discussing as the cut-off.
Well, shall we get to the very latest with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who is now off the battle bus and pitched up in Nottingham, off the Labour battle bus, I should say. Catherine, we spoke to you a little bit earlier, and unfortunately we didn't get to the end of what you were telling us. What's the very latest from the Labour camp, particularly with regards to all this gambling?
Oh, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. Well, I'm glad you can see me now. Unfortunately, I can't hear you very well, but anyway, here we go. So we have been with Sir Keir Starmer and the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, this morning over to Colville in Leicestershire to doctor's practice, because what Labour wants to be talking about today is GPs and ending the 8A scrambles with various initiatives they're proposing if they get into government. But of course, what everybody is talking about is Gamblegate, as it's now been dubbed. And of course, yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer did act very swiftly indeed, didn't he, in suspending Kevin Craig. He is no longer a Labour candidate. Now, talking to journalists, Starmer was very keen to stress how quickly he had acted and make the comparison with the Prime Minister, who, of course, took, I think, about 2 weeks to suspend his former parliamentary private secretary, Craig Williams. So drawing a contrast there. But Sir Keir Starmer very firm that, yes, he will suspend anybody who's standing as a candidate who has placed a political bet, also saying that he's never done so himself. He said he's only ever bet on the horses. But saying that he doesn't think there needs to be a change in the regulations, or that MPs need to be banned from placing political bets. He doesn't think it needs to go that far. But, you know, damaging for Labour, of course, in that people can say, oh, look, you know, they're all the same. But I think a sort of different order of seriousness, if you like, what's happening with the Conservatives. So we're currently at 5 being investigated by the Gambling Commission. 2 former Conservative candidates that Rishi Sunak finally suspended yesterday. Then the Conservative campaign director, the chief data officer, both under investigation, having taken a leave of absence. And then, of course, the news that a Conservative member of the Welsh Assembly, Russell George, has also stepped back, also being investigated. And then to top it all, the news that Cabinet Minister Alistair Jack had also placed a bet on the timing of the investigation, though he's very keen to stress he's done nothing wrong. He had no inside knowledge. He placed this bet back in April. So it will be interesting to see what emerges now, but certainly there's the head-to-head debates tonight in Washington, in Nottingham, between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. I expect we'll be hearing a lot more about this scandal then.
Well, Catherine Forster, thank you very much for bringing us all of that. Interesting that the Labour Party leader doesn't want to go and ban all these bets for politicians, although I have to say, even though there might not be a de jure ban, seems there'll be a de facto one. Who would place a bet now who's in elected office?
Yeah, you'd probably wait a little bit, at least. Anyway, elsewhere, the Alba Party leader and former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has unveiled his party's manifesto today. So joining us now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Yes, Tony, it is actually a little bit late in the day.
Yes, I said that as well. In fact, I asked Neil Hanvey, who's the Westminster leader of the Alba Party, cutting it a little bit fine, but, he made the point that it's just been so busy and then you add in the fact that people had to really rush to get ready for any kind of election with that surprise announcement for July 4th. But nevertheless, a week to go, the Alba Party launched their manifesto here in Dundee, and we saw quite a lot actually geared towards not the 2024 Westminster election, but the 2026 Scottish elections. Alex Salmond made that big statement a few weeks ago in London to say that he plans to, come as a tour de force essentially and take over the Holyrood government in 2026. Nevertheless, as Neil Hanvey, he is, running this year along with 18 other candidates across Scotland, and his plan is to go down and to basically be a thorn in the side of the establishment parties and to try and, push them towards, ideals that Alba Party holds. And then a little later, I got a chance for a rare sit down with Alex Salmond, and asked him, first of all, about, the differences north and south of the border for this election, because there is a lot of talk about reform since Nigel Farage announced that he was taking over leadership of the party. Not so much up here in Scotland, unless it's conversations about the splitting of the Tory vote. But up here, of course, we've got three now pro-independence Scottish parties who are all running for Westminster seats. And interestingly, Alex Salmond, he said that there was quite a few similarities between Reform and Alba in that, they're the radical parties and they are come to upset the balance. And I thought that was quite interesting to hear from him as well. And oh yes, he did have a flutter on the election, but it was only in the horses. How many times are we going to hear that line?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire. You're live in Dundee for us. Good stuff. But still to come, there are a growing number of Brits who are going abroad to get cosmetic surgery, think tummy tucks, think nose jobs, and are becoming victims of botched surgeries. But should our NHS be picking up the tab to correct the impact of such treatment? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
We've been talking about the White House is concerned with playing down concerns about the health of President Biden, who's apparently taken to freezing during public events. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was seen herding the president back into a photo with world leaders after he shuffled aimlessly away from the group. In the last few days, videos and images of the president freezing at a fundraising event went viral, but the White House stated that they were deceptively edited cheap fakes. With me now, again, is my panel, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop and the associate comment editor of The Telegraph, Mujaz Ahmed. Mujaz, I mean, you are a journalist. What about this idea that in some way the images could be fake?
They could be fake, and some of them will be fake, but the reason these AI images or AI videos or weirdly edited videos are a problem for the White House is that people have seen enough of Biden freezing in real life.
It's not going away, this one. It's perception versus reality, but as Mustafa said, it doesn't matter because it's now become Biden's reality, which is bushfighting these questions about his ability connected to his age. I don't understand where you go from here. He's got a vice president who isn't presidential material, who I think polls worse than he does, despite these you would call them ageist. In many ways, it's about his competence, isn't it?
It can make a big difference when the president whose mental competence is under question, is running on the matter of competence itself. They're trying to paint Trump as being incompetent, as being not presidential, as being unable to lead, while they have a candidate who struggles to get off the stage. Yeah. That's the issue for them. And it's not really about age. He's not much older than Trump, as you say. It's about the appearance of age.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:23 in the afternoon, of course, and a growing number of Brits have headed abroad for cheaper cosmetic surgery, but it's not always value for money. 6 Brits died last year following treatment in Turkey.
Extraordinary. But now a leading scientist at the BMA has suggested and complained that the NHS is actually having to pick up the tab to correct all of these botched surgeries.
Well, joining us now is Cindy Jackson, aesthetics consultant and author of How Not to Get Botched. Well, who better to talk to? Cindy, just to set the scene here, we hear a lot about people going over to Turkey because it's cheaper to get your tummy tuck, to get your nose job, to get your boob job, whatever it is, even a Brazilian butt lift. That was in fashion. How dangerous is this, and what sort of things can happen?
A lot of things can go wrong, Emily. We don't know exactly the circumstances that these things go wrong. And I mean, it can be issues with anesthetic, with lack of training, with lack of equivalent hygiene to what we have in the UK. And also flying immediately before and after a major surgery isn't indicated. We don't know about the aftercare, but it really is on the rise, not just in Turkey and other nations like that, but things can go wrong wherever you have surgery if you don't have the right information.
I suppose that's a really important point, because I suppose there must be plenty of botched surgeries here at home as well as overseas.
Absolutely, there are. But the problem is, with overseas, people are dying. Often in the UK, people are disappointed and they get revision surgery. But with the rising cost of surgery in the UK, elective surgery, people are seeking alternatives abroad. And of course, when they come back and it's not as expected, or they have issues, or they're really in a bad way, they have nowhere else to turn because they have no funding to get it corrected. So this is the problem. And also, I mean, I've heard some terrible, terrible cases. In fact, one case I know of when a young woman went to, well, I won't say what country, she went abroad for a tummy tuck and breast augmentation. She was very happy, but she thought her scar around her tummy tuck was quite extended. And they said, well, we just needed to do it slightly differently. Anyway, she came back to the UK and wasn't recovering very well, didn't feel her best, kept going to the doctor. And eventually she ended up having a battery of tests that revealed her kidney had been harvested.
Oh, my goodness.
So these things go on, and people never...
Sorry, Cindy, someone...
Yes.
Just if you can, tell us a bit more detail about this. Is extraordinary. Someone went in for voluntary cosmetic surgery and, without their knowledge, had their kidney removed.
They had their kidney harvested. These things are done to order. It's a huge black market. And it happens in countries where, when you go to try and find out more about it, who did it, what happened. They've packed up and moved on. They've had their money. There's a lot of money in organ trading.
Now, the reason people go to other countries is often because it's much less expensive. Of course, you might get a breast augmentation for £13,000 here. In Turkey, you can get it for £3,000. I mean, I don't know the sums, but let's just say that. So you can see it's tempting. You could see why people are tempted to do this. But is the problem that some of the doctors aren't as experienced or they don't have the quality of care that we might expect in some Western European countries? What's the main issue here? Because we don't want to, you know, talk about all doctors in Turkey as being bad. Of course, some of them will be absolutely experts in what they do. What's the issue?
Amazing. The issue is the unknown factor. Which ones are amazing? Which ones are not? What are the hygiene standards like? What's the aftercare like? Who is the anesthetist? This is one of the most important factors. You might research your doctor thoroughly, but if you don't know who's going to be giving you the anesthetic and what combination of chemicals and pharmaceuticals they're using, I mean, this is the most dangerous part, really. And most people don't even think to ask who the anesthetist is and what his qualifications or her qualifications are. So I'd say it's all of the above. It's a cocktail of different factors that can really end in disaster. And as we know, are ending in disaster. And the NHS does have to pick up the tabs because they're ultimately responsible for the UK citizens.
But that comes to the big question, doesn't it? A lot of people think, goodness me, why is the NHS spending millions of pounds every year on fixing the botched mistakes that people have paid thousands of pounds themselves to get done to them abroad?
What choices do they have? They can't turn away someone who's in pain or dying. Do a lifestyle choice of their own. It's like, well, they also treat smokers for lung cancer.
I suppose we could ask people, if you're going to go abroad for surgery, get insurance on that surgery.
It's more difficult than that, but you can't really insure against elective surgery when you go abroad. It's not part of your travel insurance.
Sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. The answer probably is to be more careful, do your homework, and if you possibly can, stay home, have it closer to home, save up. Some elective surgeries are available on the NHS. For example, if you've been morbidly obese and you need a bariatric surgery, that is available. There is a waiting list. However, weight loss drugs like Ozempic are available now on the NHS, and that's a much lower risk alternative.
And just lastly, I heard that some places abroad will basically just remove any negative reviews. So when people are trying to research the best doctor or the best surgeon, they think, oh, wow, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to have the perfect surgery ever, get the look I've always dreamed of. And actually, they've just gotten rid of all these negative reviews.
That happens across the board in every nation. There's so much money in aesthetic procedures that people have the power to have negative reviews removed, or they make up fake reviews that are positive, and they manipulate photographs. It's very difficult to tell what patient had what procedure with the very restrictive patient confidentiality, the GDPR in every nation these days. You just can't find these things out. That's why so many people are getting botched in different countries, not just the ones we're talking about. But this is why I wrote my How Not to Get Botched book, because there are a lot of solutions in there and a lot of things that people need to think about seriously before submitting to any type of elective surgery.
Well, we know so many people do it and so many people are seeking these types of surgery. So, yes, Cindy Jackson, thank you very much, author of How Not to Get Botched. Interested to know if anyone at home has gone off to another country to get cosmetic surgery. It could be, following a pregnancy, you want a bit of a tummy tuck, or you've always had a nose that you don't like the look of, so you went and then it went well, or perhaps it didn't go so well. Let us know. gbnews.com/your say.
I think the famous pictures that do the rounds on social media are all the men who go off to Turkey to get hair transplants.
Oh, yeah.
And then you just see an entire plane full of seat after seat after seat with just people with head bandages on.
Anyway, we're going to get the news headlines for you.
Emily, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Julian Assange says it is a surreal feeling to be back in Australian soil following a years-long struggle for freedom, which came to an end today. And the following contains flashing images. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra today, where he was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. A couple who are accused of the manslaughter of their baby daughter will face a retrial. Aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were both found guilty at the Old Bailey of concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. Their newborn daughter Victoria was found dead on an allotment in Brighton in March last year. A man has been arrested in connection to the so-called honey trap plot that rattled Westminster. It's after an investigation related to at least 12 men in political circles who'd received unsolicited text messages in an apparent sexting scam. US President Joe Biden has announced pardons for veterans convicted by military for engaging in gay sex. Sexual conduct was illegal between service people of the same sex until the law was repealed by President Obama in 2013. It's likely to affect thousands of veterans convicted of having consensual relationships. And Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says the Princess Royal is recovering slowly as he left a Bristol hospital after visiting his wife today. The Princess is understood to have suffered some memory loss when she was on Sunday evening, meaning the exact circumstances of how the incident happened are not known, though she's believed to have been hurt by a horse. Those are your top stories for the latest. Sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Hot and sunny once again for many of us today, 30 to 31 Celsius in a few spots. Not hot for everyone though. It will be cooler across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England. And by Thursday, this low sweeps in, bringing cooler weather across the whole of the UK. But for Wednesday afternoon, actually, for many, it's sunny skies. There will be some mist and low cloud around southwestern coasts and some North Sea coasts. And there'll be some thicker cloud there for Scotland, with a few heavy showers developing into the afternoon, primarily over the Grampians and the far north and northwest. Northern Ireland turns cloudy as well. 22 Celsius for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 30 to 31 Celsius for central and southeast England. Hottest day of the week and the last day of this hot spell before it turns cooler across the country. Certainly some heavy showers getting going into the evening across parts of central and northern Scotland, with some, well, gusty winds developing as well. Northern Ireland sees cloud rolling in, and for much of England and Wales we keep the sunshine into the evening and we keep that warmth as well. Even at 6 p.m, temperatures still close to 30 degrees, but we've got cloudier skies through the evening, edging into Western England as well as Wales as the change starts to take place. The cold front that brings the change is a weak feature, so it will bring some rain, but not much to Wales and the southwest as well as Scotland overnight. The wind's picking up in the far northwest, but it stays warm across the Midlands, eastern and southeast England, with temperatures at dawn about 17 to 18 Celsius. Soon rising through the morning, but by this stage we're seeing the cooler air sweep eastwards, and so temperatures will be more limited as the cloud arrives into the afternoon. Sunshine replaces the cloud in the west, but with showers, and it will be unseasonably windy in the northwest.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Problems in northwest Wales. The A55 shut between junction 19 Black Cat at Llandudno Junction down to Madryn at 14, queuing back prior to junction 20 Colwyn Bay at the scene of a serious collision. Somerset, southbound M5. There's emergency barrier repairs around Wellington junction 26. The inside lane is coned off. The Rotherhithe Tunnel, Limehouse in London, shut both ways as well for emergency repairs, causing big queues around Wapping and on Jamaica Road. Clockwise M25 A5, Enfield Junction 25 towards Junction 27. Long queues, but the earlier collision has cleared. Queuing to anti-clock just before Potters Bar 24. And the southbound M3 at the Winnell roundabout Junction 9. That's still an earlier object on the road. Again, though, all lanes are back open. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 37 minutes past 2. And just before we get to your views, I've got some new news to bring you. The Times is reporting that in relation to the honey pot scandal in Westminster, an individual, of course, was arrested in Islington earlier today. Well, the Labour Party was today notified of the arrest of a party member in Islington. The Labour Party has immediately administratively suspended the individual from membership of the Labour Party, and they're not commenting further. That's a report from the Times in the last couple of minutes. Raises questions over, of course, that honey pot scandal, that honey trap scandal, and what political involvement there was in it.
And are they going to be forced to comment? Not commenting yet, the Labour Party, but if it's a Labour Party member that's been arrested, I'm sure they will be asked and asked again. But anyway, before the break, we were discussing taxpayers paying for botched surgery. So you go abroad to have a cosmetic surgery, it goes wrong, you come back to the UK and then you get it fixed on the NHS. Is that fair? Well, our viewers certainly have a strong view on it.
Yes, Gordon says, although I don't really agree that the NHS should pick up the tab for correcting botched surgery done outside the UK, this is self-inflicted, and we already cover the healthcare from alcoholism or drug abuse.
Yes, that's true, and you could argue that those are self-inflicted. Others would argue, you know, disease. Gordon says if they were prepared to pay for cosmetic surgery abroad, they can pay for any corrections necessary.
Well, Anthony says if people have private surgery for non-health-threatening conditions, they or the surgeon should pay to put it right privately, not the taxpayer through the NHS. Well,
some of these businesses are a bit dodgy, aren't they? And then they won't reply to your emails if something's gone wrong. Wayne says, I went over to Turkey to have a gastric sleeve and had my gallbladder removed in a 5-star hospital. All was OK. I lost 8 stone. It only cost £2,400. It would have cost £9,000 over here. The surgeon I had trained in Wales. Surgeons in the UK are ripping people off. So there you go. And he says, I understand a number of people die in Turkey every year, but that is also the case in this country as well. So Wayne had a very good experience for a fraction of the cost.
And it's a fair point. I mean, there is a reason that lots of people go abroad, and it's not all terrible. So there are swings and roundabouts. I do think the answer would have to be some sort of duty to take out insurance on the surgery that you choose to have. I mean, surely that's within the realms of possibility. If you're going to pay 2,000, 3,000 quid for a surgery, you can put a few quid down on insurance for it.
Yeah, Cindy said it might be a bit more complicated, I don't know. But Martin Dobney is up next. He's joining us now. Martin, you're on at 3 o'clock. What have you got on the agenda for us?
Well, the politics gambling scandal rolls on. Confession, I've bet on myself 3 times as an MP, lost twice, won 1. Everybody does it. I wonder if this is the storm in a teacup, or is the simple answer is stop anybody in politics betting on anything. Because at the moment, we're caught between a rock and a hard place. And I said it before, I'll say it again, it's time to sack Gareth Southgate, the patron saint of wokerati, has no place in football. The fans throwing pint pots at him. They've got the right idea. No ideas, no plan, no future. It's time to go. I'm discussing that with Trevor. Stephen, who's a Rangers, Everton and England legend. He was there when Bobby Robson was under the cosh. What does he make of the situation? Plus, at 5 o'clock, we've got a mega poll landing. What's the latest? Is there any crumbs of comfort for the Conservatives? Will the rise of reform continue? Is the Labour Party simply unstoppable? 5 o'clock, dropping on the show. Make sure you don't miss it.
Goodness me, these mega polls seem to be driving the conversation. But, of course, something else that's been driving the conversation, Martin, has, of course, been your views on the England team, and particularly on Gareth Southgate. What has got your goat so much about Gareth?
The fans called this out in 2021 when England missed those penalties and Saka was chosen. He was a 19-year-old with no experience. It was the wrong choice. That was the manager's choice. The fans were sick of the taking the knee of Black Lives Matter. He became a race activist rather than a football manager. It got in the way. Journalists stood by him. Pundits were afraid to criticise him. He was simply untouchable. Meanwhile, on the terraces, we feel he's the wrong man for the job. He's the David Brent of football management, the best player in the Bundesliga, the best player in Real Madrid, the best player in the Premier League. And Southgate's performance, his game plan simply neuters the best players in the tournament.
Goodness me.
Can hear the passion in your voice, Martin. I'll be tuning in, that's for sure. Thank you very much indeed, Martin Dominey. He's on at 3, so stay tuned for that. But in other news...
Yes, ice cream vans, sunbathers and sandcastles have come out in force, with temperatures reaching 30 degrees Celsius in places.
They've come out in force, have they? Enjoy yourself, but enjoy it by being disciplined, apparently, because there are yellow heat warnings that remain across most of England. So I guess, presumably, that means make sure you're well hydrated and make sure you have a little bit of sun cream on. Anyway, yes.
The man in the know is, of course, Ray Addison, making us jealous hour by hour by having a day on the beach. Ray, what's the atmosphere like there?
Well, I'm wearing my suit and tie, so I'm probably a little bit overdressed, but everybody else is very much enjoying themselves. They've got their sunglasses on, nice summer dresses, shorts and T-shirt, as you would expect. And there's good reason, because it's very, very warm. We're at about 26 degrees here. It feels like 27, so not quite as high as central and eastern parts of England, where it's expected to reach up to about 30, 31. But the temperatures here are going to stay warm right through to the evening. By around 11 o'clock tonight, it's still going to be 18 degrees. So very, very warm indeed. Now, you guys seemed interested earlier when I said that there was a jellied eel stand. So I thought I'd just come and show you what we've got on offer. So we've got some ocean pinks here. We've got prawns, we've got crabs, we've got mussels, whelks, crayfish tails, cockles. But they do sell the very best jellied eels here at Bognor Cockles, and Jodie is with me. Jodie, now I'm a jellied eels virgin.
Yeah.
Could you please give me a portion and tell me how to eat them?
I can indeed. Yes. So here is your pot of jellied eels. There is 5 in here, and that's for £5. And then you eat them with vinegar and pepper.
Vinegar and pepper. Yeah. Why is that so important?
For the taste. For the taste.
I would have thought the natural flavour of the eel.
Well, yeah, yeah. Natural flavour's good too.
Okay, so flavour it up for me then,
Would you like
Jodie.
some vinegar and pepper?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So some people put quite a lot on here, but I won't put too much on for you.
No, I like a bit of seasoning, so that's good.
Yeah. There we are.
Okay.
And that is the finished product.
Fantastic. All right, so I'll just grab a fork, which I've got one here, and I'm going to have a little taste. So this literally is my very first time trying a jellied eel, and I've been advised not to take... Wow, they're quite meaty, aren't they?
Yeah, and they have bones on, so
They do have bones, so I'm just going to go for a little bite.
Oh, yes.
Mmm.
Good?
That's really nice.
Ray, finish it.
I like that. I think the vinegar helps.
Yeah.
No, you heard the lady, Tom. I was just supposed to take a little bite, right? Because of the bones. I've got to be careful. So that's what I've done. But I can verify it's delicious. I think the pepper and the vinegar is definitely helping. Definitely helping. And that was... Thank you, Jodie. Yes, please. Do I need a tissue? Jodie, thanks so much. How long have you guys been here for?
Over 10 years. Yeah, but I haven't been here for 10 years. I've been here for about 5.
And what are you seeing? This is you said you had quite a lot of custom today as people come out to enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah, a lot of people have. They love it down Bognor Beach. But most people come from London and then come down, and they definitely come for the jellied eels.
Okay, good.
So, yeah.
Well, now I can see why. Well, so that's one of the most popular things that we've got down here in Bognor. Now, of course, we do know as well, of course, that there was concern that because of the heat, there could have been some issues, some intensification of people reporting from things like heat stroke, heat exhaustion as well. And the NHS particularly concerned because tomorrow we know that we've got this junior doctors strike taking place from 9 a.m. So the advice to everybody from the NHS and all the other health agencies was to drink plenty of water, particularly if you are over 75 and you are female or you suffer from some other kind of serious illness or are a very young child. So maybe a bit of a diet of fish might help with that as well.
No, absolutely marvellous stuff. And Ray, you've been speaking to people in Bognor Regis throughout the day about this temperature.
Yes, I have, absolutely. We caught up with people quite early this morning. People were taking advantage of the cooler temperatures in the morning to have a bit of a run before hitting the beach. And there's hundreds, if not thousands of people down here now enjoying the beach. This is what they had to say to me. In terms of the temperatures, they're saying it could get up as high as 30, 31 degrees. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that is a bit hot for, you know, if you can keep in the shade, fair enough. But no, that's too hot. We're not used to it.
We always wear our hats and sunglasses, but we just don't go out unless we go out in the car. We don't go out until 3, 4 o'clock, do a bit of gardening, then have another rest, more water. So we're looking after ourselves, putting it that way.
Yes, it's gorgeous, and it's what it should be on the summer day. So, and lots of people are enjoying, you know, the early reasonable temperature, but it's great.
I thought nice, beautiful opportunity to take advantage of the warm weather and sunshine while it's here.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much, Ray. Really great to catch up with you. Enjoy the rest of those eels. You want to get your £5 worth. Cheers. Cheers to you, Ray. Have a good one.
Oh,
wonderful.
Me. I wish I could cheers back, but I've never had jellied eels.
Oh, we'll have to get you some, won't we?
Well,
have to try some in the studio. Make sure they're nice and chilled for you. A little bit of vinegar, a little bit of pepper.
Well,
enough salt, I think.
But do stay with us. Princess Anne, of course, remains in hospital following her accident earlier this week. We'll have the very latest next.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe, and only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes to 3 o'clock. Now, we've been speaking about Princess Anne, who does remain in hospital following her incident on her estate in the southwest of England. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, joins us now. And Cameron, it is concerning that this is now 3 nights in hospital.
It is 3 nights in hospital, but I think we're always expecting the princess to be in hospital for the best part of a week. Her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, visited her in hospital today, and he did answer some of the journalists' questions outside the hospital in the last hour or so. So what he said is that she is, and I quote, recovering slowly. He was then asked whether the princess would be out of hospital today, in which he responded, she'll be out when she's ready. So not exactly a clear answer there. I suspect that she will not be out today, given the answer that Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence gave. But the recovering slowly line was a remark which I thought was particularly interesting. I'm not going to speculate as to the princess's condition. Buckingham Palace has always said that she has had concussion and minor injuries. Her medical staff saying her injury is consistent with impact from a horse's head or a horse's legs. She is 73 years old. Clearly, she's had a pretty nasty injury because an ambulance and an air ambulance was called, although she was transferred to hospital via road rather than the air ambulance, which suggests it wasn't an urgent, very, very serious condition indeed. I believe we do have some video of Sir Tim Lawrence speaking to journalists a little earlier.
Do you expect her out today, sir? Do you expect her out today?
She will be out when she's ready.
Thank you.
Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, the Princess Royal's husband, talking there to journalists outside hospital. So he took a small bag of gifts, we think, for the princess this afternoon as well.
Cameron, reading the King's statement when we first learnt of this news, he wished for a speedy recovery. Those were his words, speedy recovery. Now we hear recovering slowly. I can't help but note the contrast in those two statements.
Yeah, there's a very interesting observation, Tom, and I believe the statement from Buckingham Palace clearly has been very well prepared by a very experienced media team, whereas these were off the cuff, perhaps slightly ambushed remarks via Tim Lawrence from journalists who just happened to be outside the building. But I think Sir Tim is probably giving as little information or as much information as he feels comfortable giving. I believe we're just going to have to wait for an official update from the palace, but of course her age is a factor here. I did ask royal sources whether the king has spoken to his sister inside the hospital or if he is planning to visit. Of course, I'm told that any phone calls or any conversations between the king and his sister will remain private, so there was no confirmation either way of that. And for obvious security reasons, they would never comment if the king was going to be visiting in hospital. So we don't think there's just no comment on that.
Well, I hope, piecing together all the details that we do know, I do hope that it wasn't too traumatic. I mean, going out on a walk around an estate, you don't expect for this to happen, particularly a woman who is so au fait with a horse,
yes,
as it were. Someone who knows exactly how to behave around horses. It must have been a shock.
Yeah, exactly. I think it probably was a shock, and she is an experienced horsewoman. She rode in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. We don't know if she was with anyone when she sustained this injury. We know that her husband and her son and daughter were on the estate, but it's a vast estate, and her son and daughter have separate properties on the estate as well. So she could have been alone. We don't know if she was alone. We don't know who raised the alarm, but clearly somebody called the emergency services when they found her. And we know that Princess cannot recall exactly what happened because she has concussion. It's her medical staff giving details of what they think happened, and they think it involved a horse. But of course, the Princess is pretty, stubborn. She takes after her late father, the late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. I think if she can and she's able, she'll be back out in no time.
Well, we hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
In unison. There we go. Now it's thank you, Cameron. Cameron Walker, of course, our royal correspondent. Now it's just over a week from the general election, and GB News is bringing you all the coverage from across the political spectrum.
So do tune in tonight at 7 o'clock for an interview with the leader of the Liberal Democrats. We'll be sitting down with our political editor, Christopher Hope. Yes, Ed Davey will be discussing all the big issues of the general election campaign, followed by full reaction and analysis from Camilla Tominey and her panel of experts.
So yes, just to recap, 7 o'clock, GB News, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Well, that's it from us today. We're back, of course, at midday tomorrow, but up next, it's Martin Daubney. Don't go.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother, and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved one.
The People's Channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, the betting scandal rolls on and on, with up to 15 Tories now being investigated by the Gambling Commission. And now a Labour candidate has also been suspended after betting on the Tories to win. Keir Starmer says that this is materially different. But does this whole sorry saga show that they're just all in it for themselves? And after last night's ball draw with Slovenia, when fans booed the England manager off the park and lobbed plastic pint bottles at the gaffer, is it time to admit We need to sack Gareth Southgate. Well, I'll chew the fat with the England, Everton and Rangers legend, Trevor Steven. And the Glastonbury Festival kicks off tomorrow. We'll be live from the sacred site as the gates open. The weather gods are smiling on festival goers and touch wood. It looks like it won't be a mud bath this year. That's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Well, the show, it's a delight to be back. So last night I was at a Johnny Rotten gig. Far more rotten activity was going on the football pitch. England were calamitously bad, a 0-0 ball draw. Is it time to face the facts? Gareth Southgate simply isn't the man. Saint Southgate is worshipped by the media class, worshipped by the FA, worshipped by the wokerati. But on the park, when it matters, has he got what it takes? I would argue not. And talking of which, this gambling scandal is rolling on and on. Confession, I bet on myself as a politician 3 times, lost 2, won 1.